Had a few things come up in closed session that took longer than we anticipated, but we are here back in open session, and I do appreciate our audience tonight, so thank you for coming. So the first thing we need to do is approve some minutes. We have minutes from a regular meeting, a special meeting where we did the tax levy, and we have a few updated minutes from a previous meeting of May 10th, 2021. So if anybody wants to have any comment or approve those. A motion?
I'll make a motion to approve all three.
All of them by Brian, second by Mark. Any questions on those minutes? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, I need approval of the agenda, but we are going to make a few adjustments. First, we're going to move our student report ahead of public comments. We have one student here, and she would like to go early. And then we will do public comments and the teacher report. And then I would like to change the whole board report and all of the items in that category till after our committee meeting. So we can do our protocol and our curriculum before that.
What you're moving around, just to clarify, we're going to have our student report go before public comments, then we'll do public.
Public comments.
Okay. Teacher report is also before?
Nope.
That's next, and then we'll do public comments, teacher report, all of the other, then you will move to the COVID dashboard protocols, public health orders.
And then all the committee reports, and then we'll go back to the board stuff.
And I would also, when you're looking at the agenda item under administrative reports, number 2, the MOU with the village is not prepared and ready for tonight, so we can remove that. We can bring that back at a future meeting.
Okay.
So we approve the agenda with the adjustments brought up tonight.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So with those changes, it's Marissa, right?
Yeah, it is.
Welcome.
Hi everyone, I'm Marissa. Update for this month, football has another game this Friday that determines if they go to state, so that's very exciting. We also had some individuals on the swim team qualify for their state, and they're headed there this Saturday. Multiple clubs in the high school are looking for local volunteer opportunities and also fundraising ideas. Something that we did in the past was Brody's War, and so we're looking for something similar to that for say, our Penny War that we've done. Also, unfortunately, last week we lost an alumni student that passed away unexpectedly. The school has done a great job at providing resources. We just need to reach out to make sure that students are getting that support that is there for them, because a lot of us have been affected. We are looking forward to fall/Thanksgiving break that's coming up, and we hope everyone that has a great November. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Marissa.
Marissa.
Just to add to that, we have 2 runners at the state meet.
Oh,
State meet too. Yeah. I tried to catch up with announcements too, so. Yeah.
Thank you, Jack, for.
It's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you, Marissa. See you next month.
Yeah, see.
Okay, now I'd like to go back to the public comments, and I just have 6 people here, so that's great. It is listed in the agenda as 30 minutes. We actually are going to be talking about that later. That's what we have normally done, but we will hear everybody tonight, but I'm sure it's under our 30 minutes anyway. So are you
Yep.
timing for me, Brian? Perfect. So first is Eric Pierce.
Going first, I guess that's what I get for showing up late.
First is best.
So you're catching me without any kind of prepared speech. I haven't really thought too much about putting my thoughts down, but I do have some concerns that I want to bring up. We've been talking for months now about this kind of divisive thing, this racially focused agenda that we're worried about, right? I mean, it's in the public eye, it's in the sphere, it's in the news. And we don't want anything really radical here. We're not trying to say we don't want our students to learn about racism. We don't want our students to be, like completely sheltered. We want our kids to have a very exposure to diversity. We want them to grow up well-rounded. What we don't want is divisive, partisan, or political agendas being pushed in the schools. We're just normal parents. We want our kids to come to Waunakee and get a good education. That's what we want to focus on. The idea that there's these racially motivated things are what's concerning us. And this entire time, we've been told by you all that, hey, there's none of this CRT stuff here. There's none of this. Well, you can call it CRT, you can call it, equity, you can call it, social justice, whatever. And we just don't need to have a lot of racially focused instruction where we look at things, everything looking at things through a racial lens. Yes, there's racism here, and yes, we need to deal with that. Absolutely, we need to make sure we teach our kids to grow up and treat people equally and make sure we treat people kindly no matter what their background. But we've been told constantly, time and time again, don't worry, it's not here. We're not teaching it here. And everywhere we dig, all these partnerships that people are trying to bring in, it all seems to have this network, this weaving in this agenda. And everything from the WPEN, which we've talked about already, that we believe that they have a lot of content that is very divisive on their website and their Facebook and social media and all that. And you can say, hey, that's not really what they're going to be bringing into here. But that's, if they put that on their website, well, that's what their ideals are.
30 seconds.
Okay, but now we find that in, last Friday, there was some content that was found on the school district's website that talks all about anti-racism, cites resources for the students, that talks about, things like Ibram Kendi, and it lists all of these things which are tenets of CRT. And they're on the school district's website. So that's where our mistrust comes in when all this stuff sort of ekes up. And that was as of like a couple days ago. So how is it that we're constantly told, don't worry, it's not here? And I know I've heard that, oh, well, this is just a Google Doc that was brought in and it's really not anything that we have control of. But you have control. That's on your website. It was put on there by your staff, and that's the concern. Is that
Thank you.
the concern is that your staff are getting indoctrinated by all this and then weaving this stuff in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tiffany Bernhard Schultz.
Good evening. My name is Tiffany Bernhard Schultz. I am the mother of 2 elementary school children at Arboretum Elementary. I have 2 asks for you tonight. My first ask is that you abandon the Dane County mask requirement and make masks optional as soon as it's lifted, as early as Monday, November 29th, 2021, when our children return back to school after Thanksgiving. Referring back to the August 2021 vote, a few parents asked for a vaccination opportunity before this requirement was lifted. Parents received their wish. At this point, parents should be given the opportunity to choose whether or not they want to mask or not mask their child. An earlier survey showed that more than 70% of parents wanted a mask optional classroom to start the school year. In addition, the CDC updated their guidance for COVID-19 prevention in K-12 schools on Friday, November 5th, and masking is now a recommendation versus a requirement. My second ask is about contact tracing stats. As a community, it would be nice to see more transparency about contact tracing, including a weekly bar graph with the data the contact tracers find with the location of transmission for each COVID case, if known. For example, school versus sports, or did it come from a home environment, etc. A second graph with the number of student-to-student transmission in school versus adult-to-student in school versus child-to-child outside of school versus adult-to-child outside of school. And third, a column on the weekly COVID summary with how many quarantine-healthy individuals have tested positive after quarantine. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I hope we can move forward to better tomorrows.
Thank you, Tiffany. Greg Gens.
Hello, my name is Greg Gens. I have 2 daughters in the district. I'm here to talk tonight about partnerships and contents the district is making. In early 2020, disproportionality was found concerning referrals of black students to our special ed program. Referrals later found to be race neutral and appropriate by the extensive report that was done. Even though they were race neutral and appropriate, 3 partnerships were formed to address disproportionality between the National Equity Project, MSAN, and the Nehemiah Project. All 3 organizations use rhetoric calling for disrupt or disconstruct the current educational system and reinvent or reconstruct or fundamentally change that education system. The NEA uses content like collective well-being, this is from their website, white supremacy, systems was not created to produce equal outcomes. They maintain inequity by design. The rhetoric includes references about systemic racism, clearly identified in the book that we used, that the school partially funded, White Racial Frame, which talks about white population consciously uses practices, policies, and law to oppress populations of color, consciously, today. That was supported by our school system. Systemic racism is the principal construct of critical race theory. Critical race theory is also promoted by theories like white privilege and intersectionality. It's not always blatantly in the curriculum like some will say and asked to be shown, but it's often included in trainings, foisted upon staff, compelled for them to go, and we must do better. Tonight we're going to be considering Mr. Boettcher's advocacy for the Wisconsin Public Education Network, who presented themselves as a nonpartisan organization, but used the same rhetoric, like content on their website, back to school tips for Madison parents with privilege. What is CRT? Where they define critical race theory, institutional racism, white privilege, as if completely accepted constructs. Tonight, WPEN also has on their website race class narrative message
30
checklist.
seconds.
My message represents race and the shared value. My message names an active villain. And more things in which to frame your narrative around. We can do better, starting with rejecting membership to the partisan ideological Wisconsin Public Education Network and using a lens of intrinsic equal human value going forward, not lenses of race and gender that divide us. Groupthink, stating many other schools participate with the Wisconsin Public Education Network, is an abandonment of critical thinking. We can do better and we must do better. Please reject WPEN tonight.
Thank you, Greg.
I would like to make a suggestion that everyone wears a mask.
There is an exception within the
Well-
mask mandate, but I would happily do
Thank
so at
you,
your request.
appreciate it.
For speakers is that mandate exception.
Robert McPherson.
Fun to follow that. Okay. Robert McPherson, 1703 Alexandria Court, daughter in the district, kindergarten. I'm here tonight, multitude of things. One, to thank on behalf of the public, since I haven't heard it tonight, for the hosting of the vaccination clinic. I can tell you it's been extremely helpful to not have to fight the registration process with Walgreens and CVS and all the other places to try and get a vaccine appointment for my daughter. So going tomorrow night, looking forward to it. So thank you for that and for everybody who was behind that. Second, I'm here to speak in favor of the motion to do the recognition for the Ho-Chunk Nation, flying the flag. I think that's a great step forward. I think it goes hand in hand with the work the village has been doing with the university program in doing recognition of Ho-Chunk Nation, the fact that we are on lands that were stolen from the Ho-Chunk Nation. Third, speaking in favor again of the DEI committee, I do have concerns as a citizen, just that it does seem that we're shying away a bit from the process that would have included more citizenry in that conversation. I've said it before, I'll say it again. There's no Jews up on this board. There are no black people on this board. There are no Hispanic people on this board. And I really have concerns over the fact that communities have no representation, but they're being expected to be represented by people who've never experienced the issues that some of the marginalized communities in our district have experienced. I think it's a very important thing. I think you could hold meetings forever. I think you are holding meetings forever, and I don't think you should have meetings about meetings. I think you've heard enough from the community that you should be able to make a decision that could say, yes, you should have a committee that includes people from the citizenry. It's not a big ask. It happens in all other sorts of municipalities. Please don't make it harder than it needs to be, and please don't listen to loud voices of people who are still trying to push what, let's just face it at this point, because I've said it publicly, white supremacist viewpoints. They might not call it white supremacy. They might blanch that and say, well, I don't like that you call it white supremacy. It's white supremacy. I'm sorry. Finally, since I've had to hear a lot of it tonight, and because I've experienced it with my daughter's education opportunities that she's had, I do think that the district is on the right course for getting involved in the way that they are with teaching kids, about, difficult topics. I know it starts even as far back as kindergarten as they start working through those issues. I do appreciate it. I think to back off of that is a mistake. This is a district that has extreme privilege. It has extreme inequality in racial makeup and in some economic ways as well. And so I think it's critically important to not listen to those loud voices that seem to have plenty of time to come here every week. I miss seeing my daughter on Monday nights. But it's important to understand that there are other people in this community and to get other voices, not just to listen to the loudest in the room. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. John, Nettie?
I'm John Nettie. I have 2 kids in this district. Comments like that are precisely why we need balance in this process. What you have is you have extremists who arrogantly assume that everyone agrees with that perception of society, and it simply is not the case. You see people around this country coming together because they don't want to see policies like critical race theory dividing us further, because you do not remedy perceived and real racism by discriminating. That's what CRT is. For anyone who says otherwise simply is being willfully ignorant or are simply nefarious. The truth is that we hear that the line on one side is that critical race theory doesn't exist. Yet we know that the elements of it float throughout many, if not most, school districts in this country. And that's why you see a rise of parents and others on the left, right, and center looking for some sanity. The Wisconsin Public Education Network clearly, as I researched and as well as other people, has an allegiance to that same ideology. You look on their website, they talk about critical race theory, they talk about how to justify it, because they're believers. The majority of the society, I got news for you, the majority of society does not support this throughout this country. But the Wisconsin Public Education Network is one of those extremist elements that is trying to support it here and elsewhere. The truth is that they may be tax exempt, they may be nonpartisan, but they most certainly are ideologically driven. So to pretend otherwise is just insulting our intelligence. I ask that you look for some balance, philosophical balance, and any future lens or committee. I think the board should, if there is a DEI committee, it should consist of
30 seconds.
elected board members who have the decision, who are elected by the people, not by people who aren't, who are activists, and that's exactly what we've seen so far. And that is not a good recipe for balance and harmony in society. Despite what some say, we do want equality for everyone. We believe in Martin Luther King's tenets and his very beneficial and beautiful admonitions. But to discriminate, to remedy discrimination as this teaches, is counterproductive and sick. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Laura Hack.
Hello, everybody. Can I just lower this down so my glasses don't fall? Is that okay?
I'd rather you keep it over your nose, but
I'd like to speak about three things. The mask mandate. Since Dane County Public Health Department countywide mask mandate will expire in 11/27 and not extend, will our school district mask mandate be lifted on 11/29? That was my question to you guys. I'm requesting it be lifted and parents be given the choice. Number two, please do the research and do not partner with the Wisconsin Public Education Network. They claim they're a grassroots nonpartisan coalition, and the definition of nonpartisan is non-biased, impartial, fair, unprejudiced, and uninfluenced. Are the following impartial, unprejudiced, and uninfluential? Think about this. Their website lists What is Critical Race Theory by Tasha O'Malley and Definitions of White Privilege. They list Race Class Narrative Messaging Guidance. Their Summer Equity Action Leadership Summit, June through August, lists the following podcasts, what they discussed and taught. Seeing White, Episode 6. That's not us, so we are clean. Race in Place, Black Parents, Family School Relations, and Multi-Special Microaggressions in a Predominantly White Suburb. Using Critical Race Theory as a tool of analysis of race and racism in education. Another one, White Parents Need to Do More. 10 things every white teacher should know when talking about race, and discuss race, call out white supremacy. Books to read for deeper engagement, How to Be Anti-Racist, White Kids and How White Progressives Undermine School Integration. Are the above impartial, unprejudiced, and uninfluential? Really think about that. Like a few previous people before me had spoken about inequalities, and I think that we have to remember that we're all here for the same thing, to teach our children how to be fair, kind, just. Think about what I just read. It's probably too late, number 3, but I'd like to know if the Waunakee Community School District has any liability for hosting on-site COVID vaccine clinics for a non-approved emergency use authorization vaccine with no long-term studies. Are the 9 questions that are listed on the FDA fact sheet being answered by parents recommended by the FDA fact sheet, which was just revised on 10/29? Are the 29 risks on the FDA fact sheet associated with COVID vaccine being conveyed per the rules and regulations of the FDA
30
fact sheet?
seconds.
Does anyone know that the phosphate buffer was recently replaced with tromethamine, which is an NSAID, which is due to risk of myocarditis? Why the fact sheet was just updated on 10/29. I'd also like to ask, no mandates for COVID vaccines. Do you know how many children 5 through 11 died in the United States of COVID? 189 since January of 2020. To recap, lift the school district mask mandate on 11/29, give parents the choice. Do the research before partnering with third parties, do not partner with WPEN, and consider risks and liabilities to hosting any EAU vaccine clinics on school property going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Katie Dolzer.
Hi, my name is Katie Dolzler. I live at 1739 Allison Lane. I just wanted to, I wasn't planning on talking, but I just wanted to say that I appreciate that the agenda has been adjusted tonight to, my understanding is that the schools, our school board's priorities that we put in place, the number one priority is to address the needs, the academic needs of our students and the social emotional needs of our students, and to put in policies in place that address those needs. And I see that tonight on our agenda there's going to be a presentation or information about how the students ended the year last year academically, and also where they were after the teachers and the students worked really hard at the beginning of the year to kind of address where they were. And so I appreciate that that is going to be moved up in the agenda. And I think that as a district, I've been seeing so many wonderful things happening in our school district. I mean, you see the Waunakee, the media group, how many kids they've engaged just with that one class alone and how many people that impacts. I think that we are getting creative, we're doing cool things. There's something on the agenda tonight to approve a course for music that will engage even more kids and perhaps collaborate with the media. I know we're working really hard, but as we're making decisions and as we're making policy, I think I would just ask that you keep those priorities in mind. What are the needs of our students? How can we address their needs? How can we address their social emotional needs? And how can we create policy to make sure that we're continuously improving that? And like I said, I know that we're working really hard to do that, where there's so many things that we're doing to help promote that focus on our kids. But what policies can we make, and what can we do to help our teachers and help our staff address the needs of our students? They're in a big transition right now, and I think we're on the right track. I've seen so many positive things. I'm really thankful for that. But moving forward, I'm really hoping that that is, kind of like at the top of our mind as we're making decisions, and as we're spending time working through agenda items, and that perhaps, while it may be important to decide if we need to be part of a network
30 seconds.
or if we are flying flags or whatever, I think that if we can keep our priorities in line and we focus on what our priorities are, I just hope that we continue to do that. So thanks for moving that up in the agenda. I appreciate that, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Katie. And thank you to everyone who spoke tonight and bringing your concerns forward. We do always appreciate that. In addition, that we have received several emails as well, and they are always included in our minutes as they come in. So thank you very much. Moving on, now we're going to go to the teacher update, and tonight we have Anne-Marie Paradison and Julie Peterson to update us from the teaching staff. Thank you, ladies.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Anne-Marie Paradison. I'm a teacher at Arboretum Elementary School, and I'm Julie Peterson. I'm also a teacher at Arboretum. So we came with our notes. We're prepared. We wanted to start by thanking the district for providing the booster vaccination clinic to the teachers. That was well received, and also for the upcoming clinics for the students ages 5 through 11. We appreciate that opportunity. We also wanted to thank the board members who gave us the opportunity to have a communication session at all the different buildings at the board listening sessions. As staff members, we all appreciate that opportunity to be able to speak with you, hear your thoughts on things, and also share some of our thoughts as well. We also wanted to extend our thanks to the board for their interest in connecting the previous work of the DEI ad hoc committee to the work that is currently going to be going forward. The WTA is hopeful that this work will continue, and we would like to take part in the next steps. So please keep in touch with us. We would love to be able to connect the work that has already been done with the work that you look to do going forward. Thank you.
And one of our goals this year for the WTA is to keep communication open between teaching staff and the Board of Education. And we brought some of this up at our listening sessions, and we're kind of brainstorming ways that we can do that more effectively and more regularly. So we're open to suggestions as well, but we're also brainstorming on our end to see what we can do. One concern that we did hear from a lot of staff at many different buildings was the shortage of special ed staff right now. So that was something that they really wanted us to bring forward to the table to let you know that there's lots of special ed staff that are missing their lunches, missing their prep time because of shortages. And I know this is everywhere, but we see it really significantly more this year. So it's definitely a concern we wanted you to know, and it's across all buildings. And then lastly, we just wanted to thank the board for all the work that they've done to help our school and our community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
And now, instead of the board reports and all the following items, we are going to jump down to number 10 and review our current COVID-19 dashboard, protocols, public health orders.
All right. So first of all, what I want to just point out, in your board packet, you will find Public Health Madison-Dane County Order Number 4. As this has been articulated in some of the public comments, and as I've shared with the board previously, this is a continuation of the mask mandate for the county, and it goes through, I believe, November 27th. They have announced early that their intention is not to extend that further. So that is a piece that I think we keep in mind as we kind of are discussing the topics with regards to our protocols and the dashboard data that we are looking at this evening. What you have in your packet and in your materials in front of you, and I'm just going to ask Rebecca to kind of pull it up, it's some of the things that we've looked at over time. And first of all, Rebecca, let's go back to, let's go to the one on the, yes, right there is fine, that's last week. What you've seen on our website, we have changed a few things over the last month or so. You see a weekly update, you also have a cumulative update. So what you are seeing here is the update from November 1st to the 8th. It's just a 1-week snapshot that really shows what's occurred with regards to incident rates, et cetera, within our schools. It's an interesting piece. We have about 15 students that were positive this week. We had 9 close contacts. Those, I'll tell you that it felt much heavier than that from our contact tracers perspective, just as far as some of the activities that were occurring, particularly in some of the classrooms across the district. These are primarily focused on elementary. We're not seeing a great deal, and you'll see that in the next slide, that it's much lower incidence at middle school and high school, higher frequencies at the elementary. If you go back to the data last week, we had a relatively busy week within our classrooms and with regards to our students, but again, it was really focused at elementary. If you can go to the next one, Rebecca, it kind of shows the cumulative piece. And this just kind of gives you an idea from the very beginning of the school year until now of what this looks like from a cumulative standpoint. You can see that the number of positive students district-wide was 104. Quarantines was 226. The quarantines could be close contacts within school. They could be close contacts within a community event. They could be close contacts within a family. I think one of the requests tonight was with regards to how do we break that out. Part of our concern is breaking some of that information out as it gets pretty identifiable as far as who these kids are and who the families are. That was a piece we're trying to be very cautious with. We learned some of those pieces last year as we went through the early stages of this reporting, that there were some families that were very concerned about being able to be identified more specifically. So we've stayed more at a higher level here. But the quarantine numbers are not all in school. That's the piece I wanted to show you. The other piece to see is when you start to look at the middle school and high school. You can see over the course of the entire school year, we've only had 27 total positive students. So, and we've had 11, and then there's some change at the middle school with regards to close contacts. So the reason you see an asterisk there is because we have a low N number, and we felt that it could be identifiable for who those kids were. So, but you can see a different story when you go up through our elementary K-6. You have more students that were positive and more close contacts and quarantines. So those are just pieces that I think are just important as we kind of focus forward. I think you'll see some of the data in a minute that I show you on the next slide that will give you an idea of what's happening community-wise. But within our schools, right now, I would say from our contact tracers perspective and from our nursing perspective, relatively active on a daily basis with regards to tracking things at the elementary, and relatively quiet, not zero, but relatively low numbers at the middle school and high school. So those are things that I'll continue to track. If we can go to the larger spreadsheet, and if you can just go to the very last line, right there, Rebecca. If you can kind of blow that up so I can look at the top line. Yeah, if you can go, it'll let you. There you go. What I'm going to point to is this number right here. And this is a 7-day positive average. This is community-wide. So this talks about what's happening within the boundaries of our community, not just kids, but all of the adults within the geographic boundary of our school district. Our 7-day average is 8.71. If you can scroll up a little bit here, Rebecca, to the top, there we go. You can follow that same number. And you can see that just over the last few weeks, it's gone up. I mean, we were down to like 2.86 here on October 25th. Today, you're at just over 8. I guess all that shows is that there is some activity that's happening in our community. I mean, that's a piece that whenever that number goes up, we see increased activity in the school. From the previous slides, I think what you are seeing is we're seeing more things happening really at the K-6 level, and we're still not seeing an uptick happening at the middle school or high school. So from our assessment, that's really kind of what's been occurring. I guess I'd entertain any questions with regards to kind of just the high level data that we have there, and if there's any questions that you have.
Just to be clear, your 2 to 3 number, that's per day or per week?
2 to 3 number.
When you were saying 2 to 3 7-day average, so that's 2 to 3 cases per day.
This is your
across
positive 7-day average, so that's the number of cases per day
Per
averaged
day.
over a 7-day period.
Just to be-
So that's been a piece that, from my perspective, as that number goes up, we usually see more activity in school. As it goes down, it's usually correlated to lower activity in school. What I would say is that the increased number we're seeing right now is generally contracted. We're seeing it show up at school primarily in our K-6 area. And over the last week, we've seen pockets of it, particularly at Heritage Prairie Intermediate School. Yes.
It's just my observation that for that 7-day average, new cases last 7 days, 7-day cases per 100K, and the 14 burden rate per 14-day burden rate for 100,000 K. Those are all high marks going back to October.
Right. Yep. Yep. That's actually been a piece that's been continuing to rise. It then leveled off. It then fell off. The last few days we've seen a rise. I can't particularly point to what that is. I mean, that's a community number. I mean, when you take a look at this from a school district perspective, what we're feeling and what the reality is like I said, we're not seeing it necessarily at the secondary level as much. We're seeing it more primarily at the elementary. It's kind of a mix of students and also community. It's not like all of those are students. Certainly you see what those were. For the last week we had, 15. So of that total, there is a proportion of those that are students. So we feel that, and those students are primarily congregated at the elementary right now. What we have been doing and continue to do, we have not quarantined entire classrooms. We have really stayed relatively tight to identifying those close contacts and identifying people who, in the masked environment, if you're both masked, we're not quarantining kids in school. Obviously that has a little bit different implication at the elementary when you have, like, you're sitting next to somebody at lunch. That's really where the in-school quarantines come from. Many of the other ones, kids that are being quarantined, are because of either an affiliation or a contact outside of school, a family, or some other level of that. So, I mean, I think this information really, when you take a look at the data that we have, it's just an indicator of what's happening community-wise. Some of that then precipitates into our school, and then from that perspective, then we have to kind of look at where is it impacting us. I mean, I wanted to just kind of, as Joan and I talked, I just wanted to review what our quarantine pieces are. Talked about them at the elementary. At the secondary level, there's another piece that gets added in there, not only the masking piece, but also the vaccine piece. So if somebody is a close contact or is deemed to be a close contact, but they're vaccinated, then they're not quarantined. So I think that'll be a piece that, as elementary kids, for those that choose to move through that protocol as well, that will be an additional piece that we can identify. So if there was a student who was identified as a close contact and they were vaccinated, then they wouldn't be quarantined under the current quarantine rules.
Randy, do we know, as a district, not by individuals, but how many kids are vaccinated? You know, do we, you know, obviously you look at it from a county standpoint, but do we require?
No, we didn't. The closest we have to that is when we did some surveys last spring, where we realized that our middle school and high school is relatively high. I think, Tim, when we took a look at that, were we in the upper 70s?
upper 70s at that time, and we know that for the school district total population right now, we're at 78%.
Right.
And that includes the younger population that's just starting to be eligible. So I would say 85%.
Yeah. So we're highly vaccinated. We haven't I haven't asked a survey to find out, and I haven't had people sign up as far as who they are. But I think when I look at when we look at even back to a situation we had this summer where we had a large group of kids that were identified as close contacts in an unmasked environment, the number of kids that were quarantined was very small. And it correlated with what Tim was saying based on the vaccination status.
When students come in, they have to have a vaccination for mumps, and, that kind of stuff. Do you see that for COVID, there could be a requirement, at least so that we know from the health standpoint, not to discriminate or anything like that, but at least as a management tool.
Right. I think from what I've at least seen, heard, and understood is that all of the other ones are mandates by the state. So at this point, there isn't a mandate for COVID by the state. It is still kind of running through all those final approval processes. I've also would say at this point, I wouldn't recommend us just on our own identifying a student vaccine mandate. But I would say that's something that I really haven't heard a lot of discussion about at the state level, but it's certainly something I'm sure will be a point of discussion at some point in the future. But right now, I'm just in the channels that I'm in communicating with, that hasn't been part of the dialogue. It's been more about timing of these different vaccines for different age groups and then the booster shots.
Do we have a feel, we put on the booster, or we put on the vaccine clinic for the elementary. Is there any plan, to do boosters for, 7 through 12, or they don't require?
At this point, you got to
They
be
don't
18 or
qualify.
above
Right.
to get a booster.
Yeah. So there's some age pieces that go along with that. I don't see us necessarily doing that right now. I think there's opportunities for those boosters as they move forward, and I think it's, as Brian said, there are some age pieces, so some of that's still in process. We did offer it for our staff because we did hit that threshold, and we made that as an option for them to receive it, and many of them did.
So I think as a board, as we come to this point, I know that we had medical ad hoc meet early in the year. Jack kind of pushed that we don't talk about it until October. We're now into November. We have this order that's being lifted. Where do we go with the mask mandate?
I would make a motion that once the mask mandate is lifted by Dane County, that masks are optional for 7 through 12, and then the elementary has just been opened up. Then January 1st, because that would give parents enough opportunity to get the vaccine, that January 1st we would make it optional for the elementary. I would maintain mask mandatory on our busing, because you probably get elementary and high school kids or cross. I would keep the mandate on the transportation.
And the busing is still a federal mandate at this point. School buses are considered public transportation, so we're still under that mandate, I think, till mid-January. Is that right, Steve?
So Jack has made a motion
So,
to kind of.
I'm not sure I'm
split
clear
our-
what the motion is. You're saying,
Mask optional after Dane County removes the mandate. So that would be for 7 through 12. Mask optional, or mask optional for 7 and 12. The mandate for the elementary would stay on until January 1st. And then it would be optional throughout our building as of January 1st.
I don't see the need to hold it out if they're gonna have, they right now have the ability to get them. So those that really want them are getting them right now. So to hold them out to the end, to the next year, I guess I'm not understanding why.
Well, what it does is it gives parents enough time, you know, if they didn't take the clinic that we offered, and they have to, if they want to talk to their pediatricians, or, you know, they want more information before they vaccinate their kids, it gives them, you know, the opportunity to do that.
And it's still a 2-shot process. So you get your first shot this week, you have to wait 3 weeks, and you're really not fully vaccinated for 2 weeks after that. So what Jack is proposing is adequate time to get that full vaccination for that grade level. I believe that's what you're saying.
I'd second that.
So we have a motion and a second by Judy. Discussion on that. Mark?
Yeah, in spirit, I like the motion, but I don't see why we would treat our elementary level students differently than the high school level. The initial numbers look very promising as to how many will be taking use of the clinic. We pretty much have hung a lot of our decision making based on what Dane County Public Health has mandated. And it would seem to me that if we have a mask mandate, and we obviously have to comply by it, once they take the mandate off, why wouldn't we just come up with our own policy? And or accept their decision in total. And so I think it serves our public better if K-12, they're treated the same way regarding mask, optional or not.
You can amend the motion.
I'm sorry?
You can amend the motion.
Yeah, I thought we'd get to discuss
Yeah,
before
Yeah,
we get to
let's do the discussion first. Dave?
I think, you know, just like we worked on the summer about removing masks and making it optional, and just like we started a mandatory masking before Dane County did at the start of the school year, made it mandatory, we worked with a medical committee of people within our community who we're extremely lucky to have some of almost the top experts at the UW live in Waunakee. I think we should bring them back together and we should talk. I mean, the concept of, do you just say, we go totally mask optional even though K-12 hasn't gotten to full vaccination status? Or do we have a delay time period? I think that's something that someone can tell us better than we can sit here and say, we're the medical experts. I'd say we bring the committee back together and let them have their piece. We have plenty of time between now and when Dane County's going to lift it to get that set up.
Brian?
You know, one thing too, we might have pockets in our district that maybe that, like music, performing arts, where they're blowing instruments and stuff and still in small rooms, that there still may be a concern in those areas. So, you know, I'd hate to make something now, and still, they're part of our community. We need to listen to what they're telling us as well. And that's something we didn't do up to this point, right? So I think we do need a little bit more time to be able to find out, is there pockets in our schools where it may benefit us to keep a mask during that class because of the situation that they're in. I do not favor a teacher saying, you know, I teach Spanish or English, I want masks. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there are certain ones, choir, band, stuff like that, where sometimes they're very tight quarters where they might it's higher risk to spread anything. So I just want to make sure that we do that, check those out before we make a decision.
Mark?
If we do that, and we consult the medical advisory committee, I think all that has to be done before Thanksgiving, so and I still think we do a disservice to the public because they have no preparation time. Maybe we were in error of not addressing this particular issue as soon as we knew this was going to happen. It just, what it does, it will take at least 3 or 4 weeks off the potential time to, well, there's no preparation time. So we'd have to still at least get it in by pre-Thanksgiving to be effective as of that Monday after Thanksgiving, or at the worst, the second Monday after Thanksgiving.
Well, I think we could, if we wanted to call back the medical adapt committee, we could, and just follow up with a board meeting after that.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I would call the full board meeting, have an additional meeting right on that same night.
Like even the same night,
Right.
Yeah.
if we want to go that route, I feel we just,
I'm not saying it's Jack, I'm not saying it's a bad motion, like, I'm saying we've been crucified for being too quick without finding out information. I think for teachers, we don't live in those classrooms. Let's find out exactly if
That's a
there's
good
something
idea, too.
there that we're not thinking of.
Yep.
Well, I think the data's been shown, that it's higher incidence in the elementaries. We've got a pretty good idea of the number of vaccinations. I think Tim said 74% we just vaccinated, and that includes the elementary. And we're going to be vaccinating almost 900 to 1,000 kids. So that number is going to go up. And what are we going to do with band? Are we going to keep band outside? Do we have to put heaters out
I
there?
don't know, that's why we talked to them.
Right now, band is inside, so we don't have to continue to do that. They use their bell covers over their instruments. So the idea of masking in a band environment is generally, it's kind of your
So we keep the bell covers on the
use some of those
instruments
things. And
while
I think that the concern that I've heard from some staff is more with around some of the small, it's kind of what Brian said, it's a little bit more of the smaller quarters, particularly around the vocal music where there's more respirating out in small spaces. I mean, that's the one concern that has been brought forward. As far as other locations within the school,
I can't think of any.
I can't think of any either. That's just the one that's been articulated to us that is a concern as we consider things moving forward.
And the elementary does have recorders that they use. And I think our high school kids probably have a better idea of controlling their spit when they're than our elementary school kids.
I think what we got to do is put a roadmap out there for the community. I think that's where the community has been somewhat up in arms, is because there is no, we go to another committee, we have another meeting, we talk about it, and we see the numbers are dropping.
The numbers are going up as of the last several weeks. We're 4 times higher than we were a month ago.
So to call the committee back, the subcommittee, to answer one question, whether the vaccine needs to be effective until X amount of time. I mean, to call the committee back for that one thing, I don't feel is necessary. You can get that question answered. Go ahead and ask them.
I don't think that's what we're calling them back to
That's
ask.
what we're doing, because, all right, they've been given the chance to vaccinate. Those that have been vaccinated, vaccinate. Those are, even if, let's say you're vaccinated, go ahead and keep wearing the mask if you're that concerned until you need the full vaccination come January. Wear your mask. It's you that needs the vaccination, you that wears the mask. Quit. They dropped it. I mean, they're being that cautious in Dane County that they're going to say, no, you can drop it. Drop it. Why do we have to impose something additional when it's already been cleared? And that's my standpoint. You can continue to wear them. Let those that need and want to wear them wear the mask. You don't need to enforce it on everyone.
We do have a motion and a second on the table.
I'd like to propose an alternative to the motion,
An amendment.
that amendment, and that would be that we go mask optional for all students, effective 11/27.
I second.
How is that an amendment for this one?
Because I said
He went to-
elementary went to junior.
Okay, so you're saying, okay, he changed
So
it.
Does that remove the thing that if Dane County doesn't lift the mask mandate, we're gonna go mask optional anyway? Does that change that, are you eliminating anything about Dane County lifting the mask mandate? It's just gonna happen 11/27 no matter what?
No, well, the Public Health Dane County said they're not going to extend it.
So if Dane County does not extend it,
Right.
that's your motion.
That's my
If
proposal.
Dane County does extend it,
Then we stay with the-
we need to
we stay
adhere
with
to
the
the
mandate.
order. That's what you're saying.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have an amendment where it would be mask optional if Dane County does not extend, starting the Monday after Thanksgiving.
Assuming they decide not to extend it.
Can I add something here?
Sure.
I guess I just want to clarify also, if that were to pass, it also maintains that we still are maintaining our same contact tracing and quarantine pieces.
That's correct.
Yes.
So I mean, all that means is if you have incidents, you potentially, if you have you could have more people that get quarantined as a result. I just want that to be out there and open.
No, I agree.
As part of that. Now, obviously, that's a piece that as you kind of go forward and you have more people vaccinated, you have more options to not get quarantined. But that does add, and I think quarantining is a piece that in the future, as we kind of see how these things roll forward, we have to discuss. I mean, there is a point, as I've shared in the past, I don't want to be in the business of contact tracing for perpetuity. But I think that in the meantime, you probably need to keep that as to kind of get a sense of kind of how this is all working within our school.
I think to that point, Randy, I think what you do, if mask is optional, as of November 27, what we do is revisit at the January board meeting, you know, how is this going? Can we leave the, or disband contact tracing?
Dave?
I'll make a motion to table the motion and amendment until after a meeting of the Medical Advisory Committee to happen before Thanksgiving.
I'll second that.
Okay, so now we have a motion to table the amendment.
The motion and the amendment.
So, anybody want to clarify, or we're going to vote on the tabling and calling together the medical ad hoc?
So just for clarity, so Dave's motion, Dave made the motion, Brian seconded. If that passes, then that would table both of those pieces. And this would then cause it to reconvene at a special meeting of the board after it met with the medical ad hoc committee, just for clarification.
Correct.
You know, the thing that I'd like to
It's
clarify.
non-debatable motion.
The thing that I'd like to clarify, I don't care if it's non-debatable, when you have these ad hoc committees and you ask them to vote, that's what gets the public upset.
They don't
They don't vote.
We do.
They
Have
give
a meeting.
input.
They provide input and then we vote.
We ask
Jack,
them.
you'll be able to
This is
vote.
non-debatable.
We
Jack,
ask
you'll be
them.
able to vote. So we have a motion to call back the ad hoc committee, and we're going to be voting on that. And if that committee is called back, then no other
Have we have a
motion.
second yet?
Yep, Brian has a second. So to call back the ad hoc committee prior to Thanksgiving, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No. Let's do it by roll call.
Okay.
All in favor, Betcher,
Aye.
Judy,
Aye.
me, no, Brian,
No. Oops, I'm sorry.
Jack,
No.
Mark?
No.
Brian? 3 to 4.
You got that, Rebecca? Okay, we're here too. So that motion fails.
So that motion fails to bring in the ad hoc. So now we're back to the amendment, which would be mask optional for everyone after Thanksgiving.
If
If
the mask mandate.
Dane County doesn't.
Can I just clarify? What we decide now can always be renegotiated if things fall apart.
No, not until the next board meeting.
Well, yes, I know, but I mean, if the COVID.
What do you mean by fall apart?
If COVID should come rushing back.
They won't lift the mandate, so we're still following the Dane County mandate.
No, I mean, after this is all done and things are going along, if it comes up again, we can always reinstate a
Yes.
mask and maybe Dane County would reinstate it. So this is where we are today and what we want to do.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
Nothing is forever.
Okay, so we now have a second vote, and that is for the amendment. So it would be, everyone would be mask optional after that 27th.
We do a voice?
I am going to do a roll call on that. Dave?
No.
Judy?
Yes.
Me? No. Brian?
Yes?
Jack?
No.
Mark?
Yes.
Brian?
No.
That is 4 noes. So now we go back to the original motion, which is we split the schools. 7-12 will be optional after the Dane County lifts the mandate. And our 6th and under, K4 we will include, K4 through 6 will stay masked until January. Till after we return after winter break. Okay?
Can I ask for, is there any clarification on the question Brian asked with regards to areas like choral music or any of those pieces that have just been brought forward as a concerning area?
What, do you think it's possible to put specific classrooms in the position to do that?
I just want to make sure it's clear what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not crazy about trying to create different pockets because I
Yeah.
don't want to be creating more of those pieces, but I know it's a concern from some of our staff, particularly given just the nature of the work that they do in a smaller area. And I don't
Since
think
it's optional, could it be trying to get people to buy into it and if the class agrees to it? Or is that, I don't know, is that crazy?
I wouldn't want to put our teachers into trying
Asking
to
them to do
persuade
that.
or not, you know.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to get into that. I mean, it's kind of either we decide that that is a piece we want to go to, or it's a piece that we don't want to entertain.
Is there any other place besides that choral music?
Those are the only ones that have been brought to my attention. I think Brian articulated that, and I think that's been brought to Tim's and mine as well. And we've had some conversations with Molly and from the music department, and I don't know if it's necessarily a piece that's it can be reviewed at a point in the future, but that's the area that at least I've heard articulated concerns about.
And it sounds like that portion of music, both in school and out in our community, our man's still keeping masks going. And I think sounds like they plan on keeping masks during practice and stuff. So, I don't know. We'll sort of-
And all of these are part of the protocol, so I guess I'm just trying to clarify if that's what you want as part of it. It can be taken up separately after your vote here, but I want to make sure that we kind of clarify some things moving forward, because there's a couple other moving points.
I think what we do is vote on this motion, and then we come back and make a clarify.
If it passes.
That was the point of bringing the medical committee and then having a consideration, is to give us time to do that. If you do this now, this happens before we even have another board meeting. So you're not going to have time to come back and consider that. Your new policy will take effect before your next meeting.
He needs to talk about today. That's right
Talk
after the
about
vote.
it.
That's all he's talking about.
Take this vote,
You want to vote first, and then you want to have a conversation.
and then we have a
subsequent.
conversation on the subsequent question.
Correct.
Okay, so we're voting on the two paths. Everybody clear on what we're voting on? Dave?
No.
Judy?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Ted?
Kind of want to abstain.
Abstain?
Oh, yes.
Brian, yes. Jack?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
So it passes 5, 1 abstain, 1 no. So with that passing, we will now visit the possible music situation.
Let me just kind of clarify what we just voted on so everybody can follow, because there's been a lot of motions here. So what was just approved on your vote
Is
was K6 remaining masked till after the
4K.
winter, the break, 4K through 6, until after the winter break. And then returning from winter break, that goes mask optional.
Yes.
You've also maintained that once the Dane County order goes away, which is anticipated to be at that point in November here in a few weeks, at 7/12 would then return from really the Thanksgiving break and be mask optional at that point.
That's good. And just to clarify again, so that everybody understands, busing is under federal regulations.
Right.
So that is mask mandated.
Right.
I'd like to take this time then to, I think we have one other concern is our staff. So are they automatically going to be mask optional? Or are we treating that differently? And do we need to pass something with regard to that?
My thought with regards to that was when you're with your students, you follow the same protocols you just approved. If they're having a meeting as adults, then I believe that they could go mask option.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I can live with that.
Then the other
So if
issue
you're having a
is,
staff meeting, you're having but and that could be regardless of your grade.
the other concern I had is, would this then be an opportunity to at least lighten up the mandate in the elementaries by allowing students to go maskless when they're 6 feet or more apart in the classroom? They do it at lunch.
No, I don't do it. I'm not at 6 feet in lunch.
I'm sorry?
We're not at 6 feet at lunch, Mark.
No, I know that, and
Right.
we're maskless at lunch.
Yeah.
Again, in reading different communications, there was support for close group interactions, you wear the mask. But when you're at your desk, as it's set up so that you've got spacing, you don't wear the mask.
Right. I mean, if you're looking at spacing of 6 feet in the classroom, I don't have that at elementary.
I just feel it's 3 more weeks. I don't want to make it more difficult for
Okay.
everyone. Let's just.
And the whole point would be for that age group is to get 2 full shots in. Not everyone's going to jump on it this week.
Nope.
So in 3 weeks, they're seeing family members, friends, neighbors, their kids doing fine, gain a little bit more confidence, maybe then they make a choice. I don't have a problem with what they choose.
Oh,
But our kids who don't have that choice, and those families don't have that choice, but now they do, let's give it a couple more, a month and a half for them to get this thing done, if they want it. If not, everyone's on their own.
So, back to the choral music. Do we want to, Brian brought up a good point, if, the entertaining or the more professional fields are continuing to take those protocols because of the nature of the particles in that performance area. I don't know. Anybody wants to make a
So we
motion.
Need a motion for that?
I think we,
Yeah, I'll make a motion, well, it's hard to say without, I'll make a motion that, I don't know how to say it, because it won't be, I'll make a motion that we retain masks in the performing arts and music. I guess at least until January 1st.
Brian, would it be all of the performing arts, or, you know, I think the concern is choral. It seems like in the band, we've got the bells on, you know, covering on the instruments. So
I'm not the expert in this. I've just been hearing from both elementary and high school regarding this.
could we ask Molly to speak? I think, you know, that is really.
Let me ask Tim first. Tim, do you want to, I know you've looked into this a little bit, Tim, I don't want to put Molly on the spot here, but if you want to provide a little insight, I'm happy to entertain that, if you want to.
How do we both go on?
Sure.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Molly Petroff's our department chair in music.
Hi,
And our
everybody.
choral music instructor at the high school.
Thanks for thinking about that. So I think in talking to staff, I think our band program, I think Jack, you're right, that they feel relatively comfortable as long as they have bell covers on their instruments. They've got that protection coming through while they're playing. So I think we're in a good place there. Choir, we don't have a bell cover for our instrument. This is our bell cover for our instrument, right? So, for the elementaries too, there is a bigger concern that that those aerosols do happen when it's basically anytime you have a membrane, a wet membrane that is vibrating. It really enhances the amount of particulates we put in the air. So it's something to consider, and I think it might be prudent to think as we go in the next month and see what things happen with kids not masking in speaking situations. If that, then I think we're all open to it. I just, it does provide some concern, I think, just to kind of make sure that we're protecting everybody along that route. And you've done a lot of research on this as well, Tim.
Well, we've been following the research together, Molly. So, I mean, you know, early in the pandemic, there were some highly publicized cases of choirs before I think we all quite understood how contagious SARS-CoV-2 could be, where they would have a practice and, you know, half the choir or more would be infected. So over the last year plus, there was a major effort by performing arts associations nationally to combine. They worked with researchers out of the University, I think, of Maryland and also the University of Colorado. They conducted a pretty substantial study, and if individual members are interested in that, we can provide you with their results. But they were able to really look at the aerosol question and verify the types of emissions you would see with different types of performing arts activities, whether it's drama, singing, or brass or woodwind instruments. And there's a range across activities. And for windblown instruments, basically the mask is the bell cover. And really, there's very little that comes from the musician's mouth when they're playing a brass instrument or a woodwind instrument. But for Molly, as a singer, her voice is her instrument. And so we know that there's a lot more aerosol production. Same for actors that are really projecting on stage. It's very different than conversation or even loud conversation in cafeterias. So that's why there's this whole set of recommendations and protocols around how you reduce aerosols in the performing arts settings. Now, as we move through the pandemic and our entire population overall becomes lower risk to when infections do occur due to vaccination programs, you know, you can acquire immunity through vaccination, you can acquire levels of protection and immunity through infection. Both of those have moved ahead during the pandemic. I don't think we're comfortable, given the time frame that this has come together from the county, to make a big move in music yet. So, you know, I think we would argue that at a minimum would like an extension to kind of bring more information back to this group so you kind of understand the issues. I think some of you may have looked at this more, but not to make a decision tonight that would go to mask optional in the performing arts, except for band, because band, the belt covers different. And orchestra, it's never been an issue at all.
Is this a piece, I mean, Molly, what you're really asking for is you're asking for a consideration to really kind of create a buffer between when 7/12 goes mask optional after Thanksgiving, which the board just approved, that there'd be kind of a buffer period where you can keep masks on in your choral music program to then be evaluated, even if it's as soon as a few weeks afterwards, to see kind of what so if we even brought it back at the December meeting and had that conversation, that's 2.5 weeks later, it gives you a kind of an idea of what's going on.
One other consideration is that we are in concert season. Our first concert is Thursday night. And so when we look at what is our audience going to be doing, and if we are singing or playing at our audience and sending those aerosols into that space, it's also a consideration. Like, what are we doing to when we bring our community in for those kinds of things too? And since we have concerts going through mid-December, it might be good to go err on the side of caution with that, because we're also bringing on our community. Something to consider.
I think to that point, though, you know, we've upgraded our air systems, you know, and we're doing a lot. You know, our air systems are different today than they were pre-COVID. You know, so, and we spent, you know, quite a chunk of money to do that. But, you know, I can support, you know, going through the concert season for the choral, and then, you know, January 1st, the masks would go away.
Go away or be considered again.
I think what you're saying, Jack, is that you would support going through the concert season, then after, on January 1st, you'd let that go mask optional as well.
For performances, would they still be, if we did nothing, okay, other than not taking Jack's idea here, but what we've already agreed upon, would the music teachers as a team, my understanding was a lot of this was because they're so close in practice, would the performances be masked or maskless?
We were planning up until now of having everybody in the audience masked, all performers masked. We were going to get as much space around performers as possible, but on a stage, I mean, there's only so much space for a band, right? So, you know, choir with masks, I've been doing 3 feet spacing. I really haven't done anything different than what I would have done pre-COVID, because the mask is really doing a great job of protecting us. We might have to rethink that if we take off masks, and we might have to consider doing 6 foot of spacing, which would be difficult for a choir to do, because we like to be close to each other to hear each other. So.
And Molly, is it accurate that at least for choirs, we are providing the students with the masks?
Yes.
You know.
They have we have masks for them to use, yeah, if they'd like.
So are they special masks?
They are.
Yeah, Mark, one of the things I want to be cautious of is not to have something that says we're going mask optional, but then allowing individual classrooms to decide that they're going to require masks. So I think if that's a protocol we're looking at and considering for like choral music, then that should be a protocol we vote on here. So it's very specific and it's not generalizable across the building.
So I would say even maybe, clarifying singing rather than choral, because like our elementary kids, it's not choral necessarily, they're just singing. So
right.
Same situation.
Yep. So right now the elementaries are staying with their masks through the 1st. So this would just really be for the 7-12 right now.
So what would you call that?
We're looking for
Just
motion.
Vocal?
Vocals? There you go. That's what I was thinking.
Vocal educational, vocal, yeah.
So I guess I'd make a motion to remain masked in all vocals, K through 12.
Vocal music.
Vocal music. Until January 1st.
So are you changing your motion, Brian? Because you had a motion on the table.
I think I got cut off because no one
Your
else.
motion was for the,
Well, no one gave you a second, it never,
So it never went anywhere.
Never went anywhere.
so I just was wondering, okay.
Okay, so now he's making the motion that we're gonna call a second on.
Yeah, so, make a motion for vocal music to remain masked during practices and performances up until January 1st, 2022.
second.
Any other discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
So 6-1.
And I just want to say thank you for that additional buffer of flexibility. You know, personally, I'm very pleased to see the optional flexibility we're going to have at the middle school and high school. I think it's time for that transition, but I do think there's some unique pieces with vocal performance where we need a little more time. And, you know, we've been referencing some studies here in the course of the evening. If you're interested in seeing kind of what is informing our perspective on this, just, you know, reach out to us and we can provide you with the documentation of studies.
Thank you.
There's a few other things I need clarification, or I just need to be able to share with the board so that we're on the same page as far as how we implement some of these things. One of the things that is, because we have a split grade levels, there are events that the school holds. I mean, and many of them are athletics. Some of them could be a choral music environment where you're going to have families and kids of different age groups. I don't want to be putting the level of enforcement upon my supervisors of those events to have to be trying to determine age of kids. I think that those have to be up to the families and those who are attending. So if you're going to, for example, a girls' basketball event that's coming up in the next few weeks, it's at a point when we have, during the school day, masking of K-6, but optional 7-12. I think for that evening event, I would ask that we don't have to be in the enforcement area of that. That's really on individuals.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's a voluntary thing to go to those
Right.
activities.
And then we also have our facilities get utilized by different groups. I mean, what we've normally done for right now is whatever is in place for different age groups, we've enforced that for groups that utilize our facilities outside of the school day. So like you have BDL basketball, which is younger kids. If they're K-6, I'm assuming we're following the same protocol that we would enforce them. It'd be similar mask required for those groups until January 1st, at which then it would become optional for those kind of programs that we operate with our own students. Does that seem correct
And
in
I
my
also
assumption?
assumed that public access would be treated the same way.
It is, it gets,
That
right.
K-6, you'd have to wear a mask till January 1 when you come into the building. And 7-12, you would not.
Correct. And the one piece that I just clarified though was like, if you have a basketball game and you got spectators coming, I mean, I think you can share that. I just can't be in the enforcement world of trying to track down a fourth grader who's choosing not to wear a mask in that environment. I think that's got to be up to, I think it gets too hard for us to manage. But as far as programs, at least that are specific to grade levels, I mean, I guess I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with that. Or is that on to the outside group utilizing our facilities to be able to make that decision?
I think you're going to run into conflicts. You're going to hear about something, guaranteed. Because I don't want you to enforce it, but you're going to have parents that are going to be infighting about, hey, your kid needs to be this, and it's just going to, it could get pretty ugly, I would think.
Yeah.
So I agree you shouldn't be enforcing it.
Yep.
But you just wait for the fallout of that in some of these, I think.
So you're saying that basically it would be based on the grade level of the activity decides masking of the event, or there is no masking of the events?
That's what gets complicated, Dave. I mean, you've got different levels of events. I mean, Molly was just talking about a choral event.
Right.
I mean, if you're going to go see your high school student perform, my family, we brought the younger kids with us. So I mean, is that a piece where we're requiring all those folks to be masked? And if someone chooses not to be, I just can't get into the enforcement.
How about just simply stating that it's based on the grade level of the event? If the grade level of the event is masked,
right,
then they mask, whether it's an adult
And
or
that's
the
a
kid.
better way for what I was trying to explain to Mark.
Right.
If it's that grade level, we could enforce that. If it's for the other ones,
That seems simple.
Yeah.
And you make the decision whether to bring younger kids that would normally be masked to an older event. That's your choice.
right, right.
I think it's going to be complex. I think if November 27th, it's mask optional, we're going to have our kids in those grade levels that will be masked, but I don't know how you can, tell the public, that they have to,
No.
If Dane County says we're getting rid of, or making masks optional, I'm not sure how we can enforce that.
Yeah, I wouldn't, right, and
So-
that's a little bit of my point, just so that we were clear on kind of, there's a lot of nuances in this as far as the activities that we have, and that
You know,
is-
we're masking for protection of the kids in the classroom to go to school. I think if we concentrate on saying, when you're in class, in school, this is when you're masked. Everything else is voluntary then, I would think. If you're not in the classroom, I mean, if you're not in school, the school hours, that's when they're masked. And on the buses, they're masked. Otherwise, it's optional. It's optional in Dane County,
So if you have a K-6 activity who meets at our school, regardless if it's sports or otherwise, is part of our protocol for utilizing our space, that if it's K-6 kids, that's a masked environment till January 1st.
I think so.
Okay.
Okay. That's how we've done things, that's how we've generally operated here in the past.
So
I
if
just
you
wanna
go to
make
the
sure
high
we're
school,
clear.
you're not masked, but if you go to Arboretum, you're masked.
Right.
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 That
The
seems.
So it's based on building grade.
The
Okay.
kids.
The kids.
The kids.
The kids, I'm not adults.
Not
Not
adults.
Not adults, so if you
It's
have.
kids.
Correct. It's about the kid. Okay.
But during the teaching day, the teachers would take the.
Role of whatever the kids
Whatever the
are
kids are
adopted with
doing,
the kids.
so.
Correct.
Teachers are masked then.
Right.
Yeah, with the
Except-
kids.
right.
Right.
Well, okay, just to be clear,
Yeah.
just, because here comes a parent volunteer into the building. And you just said the teachers have to be masked. Parent volunteers during the teaching day have to be masked?
Yes.
Yeah.
During the day,
Yes.
everyone in the
During
building.
the school
I would
day,
keep
everyone in the building.
The adults who are working with kids, the only exception, what I talked about before, we have a staff meeting, we have teachers meeting together, those adults working, I mean, that's a piece I
When the
think.
kids
that-
are not there.
When the kids are not there.
It can be on.
All right.
Anything else?
I got
Quick, write all that up.
that hit.
Got everything, Rebecca? Okay, and so now we're going to do the committee reports, and then we'll go back to our board issues. So committee reports, starting with curriculum.
All right. At the meeting, we looked at new courses and texts that have, are up for approval. And I'm going to have to address those in just a second. We also looked at student achievement. And we do have a report tonight, a PowerPoint on that. And so, Kim, if you want to go over both the course proposals and the text proposals.
Okay, so we have 3 new course proposals tonight. We'll be bringing a 4th new course proposal into the curriculum committee on the 18th. That will, depending on how that's addressed by the curriculum committee, may show up at your December meeting. But you have 2, if you look up here, you have digital music production, you have music workshop, and you have multicultural literature. And happy to go into these in more detail, but at a high level, these are responsive to feedback, we've received informally from students about trying to enhance our course offerings at the high school. We've got a great music program, but when you look at the courses we haven't really enlarged our set of courses beyond some additional ensembles within the traditional performance areas in some time. So the purpose in these two courses is to provide some opportunities for students who are musically inclined to engage in music learning at our school in ways that they can't right now. So, we think these are great courses. The committee recommended them for approval. But as you all know, we're heading into a very stringent budget cycle due to the way the state budget played out. So the committee's thinking here is that these two courses are probably going to run as single sections when they run. They are designed to attract new students into music. It's likely that they will incur additional staffing without a reallocation that's concentrated enough in other content areas to free up staffing and create a neutrality on staffing. So the administrative recommendation and the committee was receptive to this, was that we approve these two music offerings tonight. So they have approved status, planning can go forward, but the concept would be to actually not open them for the upcoming 22-23 school year, but to open them for the 23-24 school year if the budget is in a better situation then. We would love to bring them in next year. We just feel with the staffing implication, we're that tight on budget, we feel. The third
Question, when you talk about staffing for those, is that a full-time, is that part-time?
It'd be part-time.
Quarter-time?
I think it was .08 per course, which would be one section, so it'd be a combined .16.
I think there's also some equipment pieces that go along
There
with
are.
it too, so there's some capital outlay that has to happen as well.
The third course, Multicultural Literature, again, is designed to provide an additional elective opportunity. I want to be clear that none of our existing courses are going to be removed, but the reason why we feel this is likely to be staffing neutral is we run multiple sections of our English electives. We anticipate this is just going to cause some reselection in the choices our students make in their 11th and 12th grade year. So the thinking here is any new staffing that goes into multicultural lit is probably going to be freed up within the English by students taking fewer. Because we're running multiple courses in all of these sections, it's actually feasible. You may run fewer sections with larger counts, but it's doable. You can't really do that when you're dealing with singletons. So that's why this one is being recommended for approval and potential implementation this upcoming year. So questions on the new course proposals?
I think they're really cool. I like the music
So we
ones.
need a board vote on it, and what we're, again, I'll put the motion that we.
Mark, he's speaking.
I wasn't talking loud enough for you, Mark.
He's talking.
I'm sorry. Didn't hear you.
No, I was too quiet, admittedly. No, I think they're really cool. I wish
Go ahead.
we could offer the music ones right away, because cool stuff. And the whole budget thing's all new to me, and I know when I was asked to be on the board, how would you do these kind of things? And it seems like, I probably could personally look through and see some things where, I'd cut that to bring this in, and I know that that's not something that I wouldn't even know where to begin on doing that, but that's what I think would be a really cool thing that, to try to justify doing something like that.
I think our only caution is what we normally bring in new courses at this time, then we put them into the course description book, the kids sign up. So the first thing coming out of the gate for the budget is often the new courses that get funded. And then there have been incidences where then the budget is really tight and you're now increasing staffing in a new course. And it's just kind of that's been a piece we've just been cautious with, given some experiences.
Oh, definitely.
And I agree with, these are cool courses. I think it's just a matter of trying to be cautious on some of the budgetary pieces that this becomes all of a sudden it almost becomes the number one priority then going into the budget because it gets funded
No,
right away.
I get it.
One of the things to note on it is, because somebody didn't get to see the details perhaps, but the course offers about 7 2 or 3 week units that are each separate from across the world, different cultures, and it's not concentrated in just one. It's really a rainbow of option, experiences. So that really excited me.
Yeah.
One of the things that we requested that you come back in December is the, kind of your budget outlay over the next 3 years. Can we wait on the digital music and music workshop to put it in there? Then what we can do is kind of identify, say, hey, is this a priority that we want to, and then we can look at it with an eye to everything that we want to do.
Sure.
And, because right now, we're saying that we don't want to, we can't necessarily commit to staff, but this would give us a better picture of how can we implement this if this is a priority for the district going forward. When you look at the multicultural, that's staff neutral. The combined book list, is that staff
So
neutral?
the combined book list is just, if you were to have a question about kind of where a multicultural lit and the text there kind of fit in with what else is being taught, that's just for your reference. That's all of the books in the literature-based English courses at the high school.
Yeah. Steve, can you just kind of talk for a second? We met this morning talking a little bit about our budget process, how we're kind of changing it up this year. How does that line up with what Jack has proposed? I mean, there's some things that, to get it into the course proposal book that we would then be utilizing kids to register is mid-January. Is that about right, Tim, for the students at the high school?
Yes.
So we have to
typically we like to have it locked down before we go on winter break
Right.
because we open it up pretty soon coming
So, I
up.
mean, I'm not opposed to allocating funds towards it, but trying to get that picture by then has always been our tricky part. So Steve, we talked a little bit this morning, and you were going to have a budget committee coming up in December where we were going to kind of outline what our process is going to look like.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. And Jack, we were talking about the discussion at the budget committee to create a long-term plan. And I was going to request later on this evening that the budget committee meet during the first week in December, and also request that the budget committee also meet during early January to start getting into the specifics of the details for next year. And so I do think that'd be a very appropriate thing to do, would be to take a look at a course like this and some other needs that have come up and to see how they could fit in. And we're going to be starting earlier this year and bringing that information starting in December. So you as a board and ultimately the budget committee will have an opportunity to see that information and breaking it out over a couple of meetings so we can start presenting that. I am intending to also bring a template for the budget committee to review that would outline that 3-year plan that was discussed at that committee to get your feedback on how that looks and if that meets your needs for planning for both staff and the large expenditures that we discussed. So we do want to begin that dialogue in just a few weeks.
And I think just to clear, we talked about bringing that in January, December.
Correct. Yep. It's fine.
Okay. Any other questions on the new course?
You can take them all at once for a motion if you'd like.
I'll take a motion to approve all 3 at this time.
I'll second.
Louder, please.
Motion to approve all 3 courses?
Okay.
And Ted seconded. Any other discussion on the approval of the new courses? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
You're not approving the new, okay, thank you.
I'm just saying nay because, we don't have a plan to implement or fund and,
The implementation would be pending. The course approval, what actually Tim proposed was approving the courses and then was actually then looking at budget availability for the actual moving forward of implementation. That's really what it is.
Thank you.
So just because they were approved here doesn't mean they get implemented. They'll still go through that same budget process.
The next item is the initial report on the AP, ACT, Aspire, and the forward test.
Thank you, Joan. So we have a lot of, the curriculum committee's been very busy taking in information, and even more than the information that's been shared in the committee. There's even more in there for your reference, even beyond this. But what we have tonight is an overview of our spring assessments. Now, next month, later this month on the 16th, we get our state report card. So there will be at the curriculum committee on November 18th and then coming to the full board meeting on December 10th, some overview on our performance on the report cards. And I think at that time we'll be able to also bring in some comparative information on the state assessments with some of our benchmark districts that we track from outside of Dane County. So you can, I can roughly describe how that looks, but we don't have it all nicely packaged, but we'll have that for your next meeting. But Rebecca, if you could bring up the presentation deck, not the,
Let's go to the one that's under the minutes, Rebecca, because it's the shorter one. It's under the curriculum committee minutes. There you go.
That one?
No,
the
go.
Student progress, October 2021. Right here.
Is that the one you wanted, Tim? No, I think he wants the.
Is that what you want?
No,
No,
Rebecca, if you could go
This one is
down,
shorter.
yeah. And go to the one that says presentation. Not the large one. That's 164 slides.
Right.
We're not doing that.
Yeah, we voted on that one. To not present it.
I feel hurt. That one, exactly.
Sorry.
No, all good, all good. So what I'm going to do is go through this and then questions at the end if there's something you want more detail on. But, this is showing us our spring testing data. This is data that internally we've had since the summer, but the public release of this data is embargoed at the state level. So we brought this to you as soon as we can in a public board meeting after it's been lifted from embargo. Go ahead, Rebecca. So just some high level things to keep in mind. As has always been the case for our district, we're testing above the state average. And on the board exam in grades 3 through 8, many of our grades are around or above 50% advanced and proficient. And that's good news in the context of last year, and the reason for that, under the challenges, the first item, higher rates of non-tested. So we saw higher levels of non-participation last year for a variety of reasons, but all of them really attributable back to the disruptions of the pandemic. There are some factors with middle school and high school that I think exacerbated this because of scheduling. We have no regrets about how we approached the scheduling. It was a decision we made at the time to protect instructional time, which we felt was absolutely vital given the way the year had gone. But it did mean we were leaning on what kids were accustomed to as their asynchronous Wednesdays to accomplish the state testing.
Yes, go ahead. What tests are optional? Are they all optional for families?
None of them are optional for the district, but all of these are optional for families. In Wisconsin, families can opt their child out of these state assessments.
Okay.
So I would say overall, the pandemic was very disruptive. One thing I will speak to more, next month is that there are different ideas about how the pandemic disruption played out. I think a common thing we all heard last year, and it was a reasonable thing to believe at the time, was that a lot of the disruption was a simple function of were you teaching virtually or were you in school. Now that we've seen how our results compare with some of our institutions that we'd like to compare to across the state, and we'll bring more specific information in next month. That's thinking that was kind of prior to seeing the assessments. Now that we've seen the assessments, we realize that all districts were impacted, districts saw declines. It didn't necessarily track with whether you were virtual or in person last year, which is a little unexpected, but that's what the data shows. If you could move into this, Rebecca. The forward test is a test given for English language arts and mathematics in all grades 3 through 8. And then there's also science in 4th and 8th grade, and then social studies in 4th, 8th, and 10th grade. And so what this, kind of the color coding here is the darkest color are advanced kids. The next darkest color are students that are proficient. In Wisconsin, the cut score for proficient is well above the 50th percentile, so Wisconsin has one of the higher proficiency cut scores in the country. And then you have basic, then the gray is below basic, and the white or off-white are the non-tested, or what we might call opt-outs. And so this just shows you ELA and mathematics, and this is taking all grades 3 through 8 and putting those scores in one grouping. You could advance, Rebecca. This shows us English language arts, and you can see how it breaks down by grade level. One thing I want to note with English language arts last year is that the science, social studies, and mathematics exams were completely comparable to previous years. ELA is a little different. The state, in an attempt to reduce testing time because of the pandemic, did eliminate something called the text-dependent question, which is where students read a passage and they have a writing task. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, is that ELA wasn't quite the same test last year. And what you can see here, looking at the white on the right-hand side, you can see in general, a rising trend of opt-outs as we go from 3rd grade to 8th grade. 5th grade was a little bit of an exception, and you can see by the time we get to 8th grade, we have about 25% of our students not participating in the state assessments. Next slide, please. Mathematics. Again, this is showing the picture. One thing I would note, and this is kind of our it's a positive uniqueness. We saw reductions in our proficiency rates across the board. All other districts did as well. 5th grade was kind of the one exception. You'll see later on that 5th grade math really was not a down year. If you could go ahead, Rebecca. Aspire testing is what our 9th and 10th grade students take. And again, we're following a similar color coding here, but here you will see, this is combining 9th and 10th grades. You'll see by the time we get to 9th and 10th grade, our opt-outs have crossed the 25% and are getting even higher. So it's very difficult to draw firm conclusions from this data simply because of the number of students who were not in the testing population last year. You could move along, Rebecca. ACT data, let's go beyond this. Just this is, I think, the clearest piece here. So this shows us our average composite score for us compared with the rest of the state. And this is not the ACT that's taken on Saturdays. This is the statewide ACT that all juniors take in Wisconsin, typically in early March. And what you can see here is the trend where both the state average and our average composite score took a dip in 2021. But again, we're still maintaining our position above the state average. ACT is the only one of these state tests that you'll see a 2020 score on, because ACT was about a week before we went on spring break. And you'll know we went on spring break and we didn't come back into regular session in 2020. Next, Rebecca. One thing we look at with ACT performance is what percent our students hitting ACTs, college, and career readiness benchmarks in the different content areas of English, reading, mathematics, and science. And one measure we look at is what percentage of our students are hitting the benchmark in all 4 areas. And you can see, again, dip at the state, dip for us, but this would show what percentage of our students were hitting all 4 benchmarks. And now the significance of the benchmarks is ACT has conducted statistical studies indicating that if you meet a benchmark, then you project for a 50% chance of a B or better in that subject in your freshman year in college, or a 75% chance of a C or better in the linked class. So that's why we track this number. Advanced placement data. Advanced placement was something where we really did see a step back in performance last year. We attribute this again to the pandemic. We saw some reductions in 2020. AP was the only one of these tests that provided for an at-home testing option in 2020 and 2021. The 2020 AP was heavily modified, but the 2021 AP was not heavily modified and was very consistent to the traditional advanced placement test. And you can see that our percent of students getting 3 or better is noticeably down from prior years. And that's definitely something we're expecting a rebound this year, but we're certainly closely monitoring that. This just shows the percentage of scores with a 3 or better and what our overall test participation was. And you will see that over the course of the pandemic, we saw a little lower, not dramatically lower, but a little lower test participation and a lower percent of 3 or better. Just a little bit of our demographic breakdowns. And what you can see here, this is breaking down by different racial groups. The next slide breaks it down by economic disadvantage. And what you see here, ELA, to be followed by math, if you would, Rebecca. The same exercises. You can see we have some achievement gaps. And these are things that we continue to look at. What kind of instructional strategies could help elevate performance for some of our groups that are not having as much success as others, and how can we build on success in some of our higher achieving groups. So that's just, again, some of the breakdowns we look at for school improvement planning. And I think that brings us to the end, I think, Rebecca. Nope, same demographic data for the ACT Aspire. And again, very similar story to what you would see. I do want to point out, again, with the Aspire data, the very, very high percentages of opt-out at the high school. It's very uncharacteristic for us. It does make the data very unreliable when you have opt-outs at this level to be able to really make strong conclusions. So we're hoping to see very high test participation this year from our students, so we've got a better compass to guide us going forward. Jack?
Is that the opt-out, is that because it was done at home or online?
So
structured like you're in the building?
all of the state tests, because they count towards the report card and they're used for accountability, they all had to be taken on site. Now we actually had pretty good participation in the 11th grade ACT. I think we had maybe 93, 94% participation. So a little lower in the past, but not bad. But again, if the student takes the ACT, that's something that has real tangible individual value to the student taking it, whether you're going to a 4-year or Madison College. The Ford exam and the Aspire help us provide a gauge for how we're doing. It helps the state know how we're doing. And in some cases, when we're looking at a student who may need some academic differential programming, it's one data point that we look at, but it's just a data point. So the individual student doesn't have a lot at stake in the Ford exam or the Aspire exam. So part of what we saw was, and actually in some of these grades, I think it's a testament to how much importance some of our families place on getting a snapshot of the Ford data on their student. We actually saw in the elementary schools our virtual kids, a fair number of our virtual kids participating. But at the high school, except for the ACT, where our virtual kids did come in to test, for the Aspire, they didn't, partly because it didn't have a direct benefit to them, we think. Secondly, for better or for worse, I think students had become a little accustomed to the asynchronous Wednesday. We were trying very hard to protect instructional time and use those Wednesdays for testing to protect the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And, you know, I think there were probably some students who, given the choice of work on their coursework that contributes to their GPA or take the Aspire, chose to work on coursework that would count towards your GPA. At least that's what I like to think is behind this.
Understood.
I hope it wasn't Fortnite. And then again, the ACT demographic breakdown. And then I think that brings us to the questions slide. Same thing for the ACT. And I know I rushed through that, but I'm just trying to respect your time tonight. Mark.
On the AP test, you had two groups of students, and one of them was unique. And as a description, so what does that mean?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Mark. So on that AP slide, we show you the percent of tests that are 3 or better. We show you number of tests, and we show you unique students. Some students take only one advanced placement course at a time, only take one test. Some students might be taking as many as 3, sometimes 4 AP courses. And so what we're trying to show you is total tests and how many of our students are actually taking some kind of AP test.
Thank you.
If I can just add something, Tim, some of this information we'll be going into in a little bit more depth, and you'll see some of these slides again at our community engagement meeting on November 29th, which is specifically around student achievement.
Yes.
Any follow-up for Tim before he heads out? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay, thank you.
The next committee is the HR committee. Judy or Brian or?
I don't think we had any action items there.
I think the one action item actually we already acted on because we took it to our special meeting last month. So
That's right.
I don't
So we don't need anything?
else
I don't
going
think
on.
there's any.
Okay, so we'll move on to the board subcommittee planning for the DEI. I know that many of you were at that planning committee meeting. We have another one coming up next week on Monday. I guess, you know, it's a work in process and planning, and I don't know if there's any comments that anybody wants to add at this point.
Well, I mean, I guess I was a little disappointed on the track it took. I thought when we left our big meeting that we had, my thought was that we were moving towards a committee, not moving towards more community input. I think over the last, whatever, year, we know what the community says. We know where the splits are. I don't think we need to break it down and sit at a table with the rest of the community to put a committee together. So I'm disappointed that we have kicked the can down the road to do more community input and not work on characteristics of the committee so we can move forward. So that's my initial thought.
By characteristics of the committee, more people at the table specifically? Is
A makeup,
the
whether
makeup.
we wanted
So.
8, 10, 12, whether we wanted
Instead
students,
of-
teachers,
Yeah.
what community members, what we were looking for, what we're looking for. That's where I thought that committee was going to get started so we could get something going. I think it's, with the holidays, I think it's really pushed back, you know. So, and I feel bad for the students who stood up in front of a microphone to tell their stories, and now we're just elongating this whole process.
So kind of the comments that went back and forth in the meeting, I mean, I would agree with what Mark said in there, where the board, we're looking at policies and how we're setting policies. So help me understand how it doesn't, in terms of representation of these groups that, you know, they say that are marginalized, why would they not, they already have their groups, like the GSA or the Black, those groups. They can have that representation by coming and speaking. That's, I guess, I'm not because it's still going to be the committee that's going to be making the decisions as to what we're gonna act on and things like that. They're gonna have their group to have that safe space or whatever where they can talk those issues and bring, it's the same thing like the WTA coming to the board meeting and presenting anything that they feel is important to be acted on.
Well, I think the having their voice at the table, I agree. I thought that's where we're going. We were going to have representatives from some of these groups to be at the table to help guide whatever the DEI set forth that we're going to move to, not the public comment where they come up, they make a comment and there's no back and forth with them. That by having a representative from different groups and a couple community members and maybe a couple administration who deal with these issues, just at the table, just to so we don't have to wait till the next meeting to have a student representative say, oh, I want to comment what you guys talked about last month. We want them at the table so we can talk about it today, and not keep being a month behind. That's my thought process was. And it didn't have to be from, you know, the Gay Straight Alliance or Black Student Union. Those are groups that would want to be included, but they could have been from athletics or choir or something like that, just to get a student's viewpoint of what we discussed, instead of just catching up on what we discussed last month.
Dave.
It strikes me that the purpose of this committee is to change the atmosphere and the community feeling inside the schools. You do that by engaging with them in an active way, working together towards solutions. Having community input and having limited public input where they come and give you a point, and then somebody else sits there and discusses it and decides and makes a decision. And as Brian says, next month you get to come back and make another point about what they decided last month. That's not changing the atmosphere. That's not really allowing them to be part of the solution, and it doesn't give you that active, constant interface to allow you to make changes before you make a decision. Like tonight, what if a student group had felt like making some sort of decision about, maybe there was a music group that wanted to come in and make a comment about masking in a choral situation. They had no chance of knowing what we were just about to do. They had no chance to give that input because not only weren't they at the table, they hardly even knew that was going to get discussed. So when you're thinking about trying to change the atmosphere in the schools, you've got to allow them to be part of that atmosphere, which is being part of the committee. I think we've done all we can in setting up policies to say, how do you deal with a student who bullies another student or harasses another student? We've done that. That doesn't prevent future occurrences necessarily, other than in a retaliatory method. If we want to change the culture of the schools, we really have to let the students help us do it, and being on the committee allows them to help us do it. It creates a whole different view of how they're being part of the solution, and then they carry that back into the school. That's talking about the culture, that's talking about the atmosphere. not just set a policy and hand it to them and expect the students to act that way. I think those are two very different methods.
And I guess I didn't see like the students as so much a voting member, but a contributing member, voice, to be able to give us input on what these 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds are dealing with. Like you said earlier, you know, our kids don't really tell us a whole lot when we ask them, hey, how's this? I do the same thing. We want to know, and I think for those that really want to be a part of something, to make a change or to be in a leadership position, their voices is very important, and I think that's where I thought we were going. But I didn't see him as like a voting member. I still thought that would be more of the
But
board
at the
coming
table
through.
all the time.
But at the table.
At the
just,
table discussing.
I think an important thing you brought up was the students who spoke at that public listening session. Several of them want to be on the DEI. And the sad thing is we delay this process, they're going to be gone. And it's really too bad that they made that effort to be there, and then we delayed the process so long that we took it away from them, for them to do that participation.
And it's not just race. I mean, I talked to a kid in a wheelchair that night and stuff like that who, his perspective on how school works for him, you know, and that's something we just don't get through, you know, through a parent's voice. I want to hear it from the student and how his day goes.
But there'll be, like, throughout the year, throughout whatever, that person like that is, well, he wasn't on the committee anyway, or he wasn't part of that. There'll be, throughout the year, there'll be multiple people that may be one engaging in that. So if we limit it to a group, that group's representing what? Some, you know?
Well, that's where I thought the group was going to talk about the characteristics of the makeup of.
But I mean, so the group is being made up of people that have different characteristics. It's still, they're making up, you know, they're representing someone, whereas why not just have it the ability to have everyone that needs to and wants to, you know, communicate to this. There's an opportunity. I totally agree with you, and like I don't like this whole idea of coming to the board meeting and you spit it out and we don't do anything for a while. So it's a whole lot. I like these listening sessions that we've had at the schools. We can actually talk a little bit and have some dialogue that takes place that I feel is a whole lot more productive than, we hear something and then in a month we'll talk about it.
Well, that's where I thought it was working on trying to figure that out.
Right.
So, but I think we know the community input.
Yeah.
I think we know what people are saying, what they say, but let's get to work.
I appreciate that discussion, and I do think that maybe when we go back next Monday, we need to revisit, do we need more people at the table? Kind of a eye-opening part of a listening session for me was at one of our elementary schools, and what a guidance counselor shared about just conversations that she didn't even know if she was free to have within her group. She didn't know if the board would support talking about different makeups of family, and she was looking for guidance from, you know, what subjects am I even safe to talk about? And I think, you know, we talk about high school students being at the table to share their perspective. We got elementary staff, you know, I don't expect those students to come, but parents or guidance people, this woman had, you know, I thought great insight and things that would help change collectively that community we're trying to build. Anyway, I appreciate that conversation, and we're going to be meeting Monday, and we will continue to pursue how that all plays out. So we are done with committees, so now we're going to go back up to the board. So starting with the board report action items, everybody kind of know where we went back to?
What's the Roman
We're
numeral?
back to number 9.
9C. So I guess I would just first invite any board member who have attended anything that they would like to share with the rest of us to make those comments.
I attended the makerspace at UW Madison with Randy, Tim, a few people that attended that just to get a feel for what they do, compare and make improvements to what we're doing. Also attended the TID meeting, just the annual TID meeting. Looks like a lot of the TIFs are going to be closing, in the near future by 2030, which is positive. So.
Thank you. Anybody else? I would just like to make the comment, it wasn't such an educational event, but the One Community Bank had a tailgate. I think I saw you there, Jeff. We just recently switched our banking to One Community Bank. They had a tailgate 2 weeks ago for a Badger game. But the cool part of the whole event is all of the donations, they had all food donated and drinks provided for anybody who wanted to watch the Badger game. The donations were matched by One Community Bank, and I believe they're going to be handing over $3,000 to our student financial group. So I just wanted to recognize the bank and what they did that day. So moving on to spring election announcements. We have 3 board members that are up for re-election, just so the community knows. David Betcher for the Village of Waunakee, Judy Engebretson, Town of Dane Springfield, and Jack Heineman for the Village of Waunakee. The process is that you can take out nomination papers and begin circulating them December 1st. They have to be returned by January 4th. Rebecca, is that correct?
Yes.
And if you're interested, I will send you to Rebecca if anybody in the public wants to run for any of those seats. And the notice for non-candidacy for our board members who are up for re-election would be December 24th, 2021. Any other thing we need to announce about that, Randy?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, one thing that I asked to have on the meeting agenda tonight, I tried to wiggle it into board development the last month, but it never happened, is to revisit some of our public comment policies. If you remember, through COVID, the public wasn't allowed to come in, so we first just dealt with written comments. We read them. They were more than a half an hour, then the public got to come in. Anyway, the whole public comment policy is not being followed at this point, and it can be modified by board agreement. I just thought it might be time, as we get to this point, to go back to policy 187 and see if we want to continue with the hour, which it has been now since we started meeting in person, so over a year. Do we want to continue with the hour, 3 minutes? Do we want to go back to policy? The policy states 30 minutes or 10 individuals, whichever allows more people to speak.
I would go back to policy. And if we don't want to agree to that, then send it over to the policy committee
and have it changed. That's what I thought.
Run it through the process.
So the only change we had is we made a change during COVID where we switched it from a half hour to an hour. So I think our policy states a half hour, is that correct?
A half hour or at least 10 speakers,
Right.
whichever is greater.
So I think all we have to do is we just have to kind of retract our COVID decision to go back to our policy 187. There doesn't need to be a policy revision on that specific item.
Yeah, I agree, and I was reading it too, and I think if we have over 10 speakers, we just cut it down to 2 minutes per speaker.
And that's an option
Up to
always.
30 minutes.
We can always do that, but cut it down to 30 from the hour. I know some of our meetings get really late.
I think the other piece that's come up from talking to some board members is with regards to right, we changed our policy a few years ago to allow for public comment on any topic, whether it was on the agenda or not. And our previous policy had kind of, I think 8 of our meetings were, it had to be on the agenda, and then there were 4 opportunities throughout the school year at which time we had kind of a comment on anything. So I know I've had a few conversations with folks who've wondered if we go back to that or if we stay with comment on any topic at any point.
I think, quite frankly, we should probably go back to that, because if somebody's going to talk about a topic that we're not talking about, and it doesn't come up on the agenda, there's nothing we can do about it, right? But if, you know, if there's some specific topics, you know, that are on that agenda for that night, and they come and talk to us or do the public comments, then we're getting that input that we can act on at that meeting.
I agree with Jack.
Because they can always email us those other topics to get on agendas.
Well, I think we got in some situations where comments were made regarding other things that were false, that we had to deal with later. So I think that if they stick to the agenda, I think it makes sense.
And that is really the way the policy is written.
And we do, but do we still have other places where they can talk about anything, right?
It is limited to topics that are significantly germane to the notice subject matter of the meeting.
So in the past, there was 4 meetings a year, once a quarter. Anybody could come and talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. But the other meetings were specific. If they were addressing the board, it was for a topic item on the board agenda.
And we kept that 30 minutes, even for those open.
Yes.
I'm
It was
good
always
with that.
30 minutes. Art?
I'm not in disagreement, but we are cutting public voices by doing that. So we do have a provision in policy 187 that says people not part of the board can address issues on the agenda at the time of the agenda if the board votes to allow that. And I would suggest that we consider that their comments can be made at the specific thing. And that would be, I assume, in addition to the 30 minutes that came at the beginning of the process. I don't know. But at least, so if they have an issue with the COVID, we have to vote to let them voice their thought at that time, but
So just to extend the time beyond 30 minutes and beyond.
It would be.
Is that really what it says in the policy?
I'm sorry?
Is that really what it says? I
Yes.
mean, I don't remember reading that like that.
I just make it up.
The thing is,
Well, I don't-
if we didn't allow that, that would keep things like the architects coming in and talking to us about the referendum. Because, sorry, they're not members of the administration or the school district or anything. Per straight policy, they wouldn't be allowed to speak to us during that item. You have to have a clause like that in order to allow that. Now, I'm
It would
not
be on
saying
the
you
agenda,
could
though,
broadly
wouldn't it?
allow it to everybody, but you at least have the ability to give it to who you want to give it to.
No, you would have, you'd invite guests in to speak toward the agenda item. That would be an invitation coming in. I mean, that would address
That
that.
isn't a public comment. This is really, we're just talking about public comment, not agenda items.
Well,
So how, you know, you said the public could email, maybe that's some direction for the public in terms of how to get things on the agenda, that, you know, it's like, how do I get this talked about? They're thinking maybe their public comments gets it on, but, you know, maybe it's just being not, me personally, I wouldn't know, how do I get something talked about on the agenda, you know?
Well,
Bring it up to Randy.
yeah,
Yep, so their comment.
Yeah, so when, like, the board agenda is set by, Joan and I meet to talk about the agenda, so there have been times when the public has asked for an agenda item on there. There have been times that we've placed it there. There's been other times that we have not placed it there. So it's kind of at the discretion of the board president and me to kind of put that agenda together. And then there's policy on board members. Any board member can request an agenda item, and that's generally without question. And if there is a question about it, then it goes on the agenda, and then it gets voted on at this, when you approve the agenda at the beginning of the meeting.
Dave?
I'm the one that made the motion about allowing people to talk about anything and upping the time limit. And I think it's a mistake to cut it back, because we've had people, whether we agree or disagree with them, being very passionate about being here. We talk about community engagement. We talk about wanting people to support the school district. Yes, it can be painful to sit here until whatever time of night and having an hour or even more of public comment, but that's why we got elected. It's part of the deal. I think cutting the public voice to say you can only talk about what's on the agenda unless you happen to show up on the right month. I mean, we wouldn't hear about things that people are talking about that, while sometimes are negative and wrong, you can't clear them up if you don't hear about it. The thing about tape with masks, we would have had no idea that that discussion was going on, but it's a negative view of our teachers and our staff and what's happening in the schools. Luckily, they came and made that comment so we could find out what was going on and get it cleared up. I'd rather do that than have the community saying they won't even talk to us, they won't listen to us, they're cutting us off, they're all that type of negativity. I get it's hard to sit here, but that's what we got voted in to do. I don't want to cut the public voice in any way. We talk about community engagement meetings and all that other stuff, but honestly, the easiest way for someone to come and bring something is to come here. We have to let them do it. Not just us pick the topics that they're allowed to talk about and show up on our schedule.
I think when you sit here and you look at the number of people that have come to talk about it, there's themes. There was COVID, open schools. You know, we heard a lot of that conversation throughout the year. The other theme was masks, no masks, masks optional. You know, the other theme was, you know, on the DEI. You know, I think we're coming out of a stage where, you know, prior to COVID, you know, you didn't have a lot of people that were coming to the board meetings because, you know, I think, so I think this is reasonable.
But
And-
maybe what Dave said, maybe we don't need to limit it.
Yeah, if they're going to drop off anyway, why are we limiting it? If you really believe that.
So,
Are we talking about the limiting the topics or limiting the time?
Both.
Well, all we're doing is limiting the time, and we're saying the public come and talk about the topics that are on the agenda, because we can do something about that, because it's an agenda item and there might be a vote on it.
what we used to have, Todd, was we generally have one board meeting a month, so 12 a year. 8 of those, public comments could only be on agenda items. And then at 4 times quarterly, you'd have one meeting where it was open to any topic. And the way the policy was rewritten a few years ago was to really allow for public comment on any topic, whether it was on the agenda or not. So I think that's the piece that I think's been kind of bounced around as far as past practice, the new policy. And then as we've had some experience with this, there's been some discussion as which is the better route to go.
And since being on, I haven't seen that the public comments have taken the full hour for the most part. I mean, we've had some where it's gone over a little bit. That's not really the limiting thing. I would agree with it. It should be on topic of what we're talking about because we can actually deal with it. And so as long as the public knows they can go to you guys to discuss getting things on the agenda, that I think is helpful. Because I would think maybe a lot of the public, they don't know how to get anything on. And then we're able to talk about them. But to come, when we sit and listen for a half an hour to an hour about something that we're not even dealing with, it just, I don't think it's helpful. And,
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think even during the heat of things, we might have been over 15 speakers few times.
We were 20.
We had,
What we
but I
could-
think what we're looking at, if we have 10 and under, it's 3 minutes. If we have over 10, it's 2, up to.
What we could do as a solution here, the time frame from 60 minutes to 30 was not a policy change. It was just a procedural change they made during COVID. So if we're making a decision to go back to 30, that aligns up with the policy. If we want to change the policy per what people can speak to at the public comments piece, then I'd recommend we just take that policy, we kick it back to the policy committee, and we have to meet in the next month anyway, and we'll just address it there.
So, what is the consensus on limiting the time? Do we not limit the time?
Limit
or
it.
do we limit the time?
Limit the time, and go back to the policy.
Go back to the policy.
Follow the policy.
30 minutes will, if we have more than 10 people, then we just limit their time down to 2.
I think we should have a motion, because it took a motion to move it to an hour. I think we should just make a motion.
I make a motion to go back to policy as it's stated in policy 187 for the time.
For the time.
For the time, well, you follow the policy.
Right.
I'll second that.
Just for the time.
No, for follow the policy.
I think the policy is they can say whatever they want.
Right.
It is.
That is what it is. So all you're making is a motion to go back to the policy, which is 30 minutes. And then I think that's what you're asking, because I agree with Dave. Right now, the standing decision of the board is 60 minutes, and that was based on a COVID change. And so if you're going to modify it, you should have a vote to do so, and I think that's what your motion is.
That's what my motion is.
So we don't need a motion to send it to policy.
No.
Okay.
We can just by direction just say we would like us to discuss it, and I'll put it on the agenda for that.
So we have a motion to go back to 30 minutes. Do we have a second?
I did. Second.
Oh, you did second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
2 noes. Mark and
All right, and then we will take that policy, 187, back to policy committee.
to look at that first.
Yep.
Okay, so you have a draft agenda for the November community
Yeah,
engagement?
just real quickly, if you can just bring that up, Rebecca, appreciate it. This is just a draft agenda that Kim, Amy, and I have discussed with regards to the November 29th community engagement meeting. I think generally what we are going to see here, it will get fleshed out a little bit more in detail, but generally a welcome by Joan and I. Kim and Amy will then take some time to walk through some of the same type of slides that you saw tonight that talk about how our students are performing. They'll have some additional information that they will add there, specifically talking about Forward, ACT, the STAR, and the iReady assessments, to really give an idea of kind of student achievement across our district in a little bit deeper dive than what we were able to do here tonight. You'll see some correlation with what we did, some of the same slides, but you'll also see some additional pieces. We also are looking for some folks from our administrative team, so between now and this program, we'll have some members of our extended beyond into our principals, et cetera, talking really about other things we're seeing that are impacting student achievement right now. We're seeing some upticks in reading to reteach behaviors and other things academically that we'd like them to just anecdotally be able to share with you as far as what they're seeing and hearing in the classroom from the teachers. And then obviously this would then be opened up again for the public comments and a dialogue with the community.
So you see number 4 being like a question and answer period?
Yep.
Versus
So
just a comment period?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be what the community wants it to be, but certainly it can be a point where if someone just wants to make a comment, they're welcome to do that. I mean, the last forum became more of a comment period, but it was really set up that it could have gone either way.
And will you put it out there as if you have written questions in advance?
Sure.
So that way you're prepared.
Yep, we can be consistent with that and do that same type of thing, and we'll try to address those. Sure.
Where'd you say it's going to be at? The PAC?
This would be at the PAC again.
Okay.
Sounds good?
Okay. Very good.
Thank you. And the last item is a follow-up on the Wisconsin Public Education Network. David brought this forward 2 months ago. we had heard from the public a number of times since then. I guess we need to decide as a group if we, what we want to do with membership or participation.
Well, I'd like to address a few of the things that have been said about WPEN. I get that people tend to take a look at everything through a lens. I mean, that's just natural. Every organization has individuals in it. Some of them are Democratic, some are Republican, some are apolitical, some are not. The fact that the executive director had a bumper sticker on her car doesn't mean that that's what she runs around and does all day. I mean, I would not sit there and hold it against our, well, we had a thing about student expulsion. Our expulsion attorney represents anti-union groups. That doesn't mean I think he's terrible at expulsions. And I'm not going to sit there and kick him off because he does that. He does good in the work he does for the school district. Let him do it. The fact that she does work on the Democratic side as an individual doesn't mean she doesn't do well for public education. That's why so many school boards have joined her organization, because it does something beyond what some groups such as just the Association of School Boards does. I sent you this weekend some of the stuff they're doing over the next month. I don't see anyone really finding that those are objectionable activities, and they're very helpful. It's stuff we've been talking about for years that we haven't done very well, whether it's about community engagement or the stuff they're doing about how to deal with media on a school board level. I mean, that's stuff we've been trying to get going. I'm a little disappointed in some of the stuff looking at it, is that people will say you shouldn't be engaged with it. Certain people will specifically say it's because they did definitions for school boards to tell them what's the definition of CRT, where did some of this stuff come from. That's not advocating for CRT. Our biggest problem in dealing with some of the stuff on CRT is people have very different definitions of it. They're saying it's one thing. I mean, saying equity is CRT, I mean, I'm not sure how we go there and how you deal with that. And what was happening at the level of WPEN was trying to help board members say, what does this word mean? Where did it come from? And that's a reference material. I'll bet if we go on to the Association of School Boards, we're going to start finding stuff like that. Does that mean we need to leave the Wisconsin Association of School Boards too? Now we have to leave them because they provided a definition of a term that's showing up at so many school district meetings? That's what they are, is they're a resource to help. Their biggest thing they work on is public school financing. One of the biggest things that's happening right now is you're seeing a lot of movement on parts of the political spectrum to cut public school financing for open enrollment into private schools or charters or vouchers or whatever. And that's one of the things they deal with. And a big push on that has been along this line. So they're helping board members just see the terminology. They'll hold a seminar so that you can talk to people who know about this stuff. Randy's been doing that with the teachers. Are we going to shut all that down because some members of the community say that that's bad? I mean, at some point, we either say that we're going to be able to talk about racism, or we go the route of the Wisconsin legislature where they directly wrote language in saying you cannot use some of the wording we just approved in a course on multiculturalism. In there it says anti-racism as part of the black part or African American part of the literature study. Those words are specifically banned under the legislative laws that were just passed that were vetoed by the governor. We almost had to just basically wipe out part of his curriculum because of his wording. He used the word social justice. We just had a member of the community say, social justice is CRT. Did we just put CRT in our curriculum? I don't think so. We've got to be careful to not let the rhetoric beat us out of doing anything anymore. WPN, we got an email from a former board member. She sits there and says, don't join WPEN. But then she says and talks about what was the group she brought up? The Wisconsin Alliance for Excellent Schools. In March of 2015, the Wisconsin Alliance of Excellent Schools changed their name to WPEN. Yet she's saying that was a great group, but don't join WPEN. That's part of the problem here, is the rhetoric has taken over the actual events. I like WPEN because it does something very directly, which is deal with school funding formula, which has been killing us, we're lucky because we're growing, but it's been killing so many other districts. It hurts us every single time when we deal with the special education and students moving in and out. We need to start getting better on that. They're a group that's their main focus. I hope we will see that, just like how almost over, what, 15 some other school boards around the state have seen it from districts that are both conservative and democratic. And they're still on it. We have to look beyond the rhetoric being used to just try to micro-pick and say you can't join any organization that puts up a certain piece of material, not advocating one way or the other, but just providing a resource, or we're going to not be able to join anything. We're not going to be able to have anybody come and speak to our teachers about what is it like to be an African American in high school. Well, now we're teaching CRT, and we can't do that. We have a book that keeps getting quoted against us that we worked with the village on, and several hundred people in the community were part of that book study. And it's amazing that everything that's being attacked about that book study didn't happen. I was in some of those meetings. I mean, I did the book study, and the things that are being said about the book weren't discussed. It's kind of crazy. And at some point, I hope we can get beyond the rhetoric and get back to looking at what we need to do. And just like Joan, you went to one of their events. It wasn't about CRT. It wasn't about pushing a democratic or progressive or ultra-liberal or whatever agenda. It was about school funding, and it was about helping our district. And I think that's what we should concentrate on.
What other sources do we use for that anyway?
For what?
For what they already offer. What are we part of already that we're falling short, that we need to join this group?
We have Wisconsin School Board Association working for us, the Administrative Association. We have the State Education Association. And, you know, unfortunately, from our most recent experience with the budget, no one had a real impact on it except the legislators. They just didn't listen. I think there's a lot that WPEN offers. I just think it's a lightning rod for divisiveness, and I would recommend we not contribute to them or sign up as a partner with them to try to calm down the divisiveness.
Yeah,
we could eliminate the DEI to calm down divisiveness too.
I didn't say that, did I?
No, but it's the same logic.
What's the fee? What's the?
$1,800 a year.
I know, when you look at our budget, that doesn't seem like a lot, but when we have to keep adding every board meeting 4 or 5 new paras, or, you know, it's starting to get there, where I could find $1,800 to lessen the load on some families, or to, you know, fund a co-curricular program that doesn't get any funding. So I think we already have people working on behalf, groups for us. You know, I'm not in favor of joining it at this time either.
I make the motion to not join WPEN.
Second.
I second.
I would like to say before we take the vote, whether we join or not, they welcome you to participate. And I think the fee is more of a donation, and if anybody individually wants to donate, they can donate. And I appreciate that the group, they will welcome you whether you're part of their group or not. And as Dave said, they primarily work on funding. And they didn't make a dent last time, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't keep it, pounding away at it, because our funding formula needs to be revamped. And they do that. So, I get the time and the politics and where we are right now in this community, but this organization does do some good out there. So, and individually, you can still participate.
You're right, Joan. I've been part of them for 3 years.
Yeah.
They don't require you to spend anything.
Yeah.
It's hard to do the work without any funding, though. And I congratulate them for not being an exclusionary group. I mean, talk about WASB. You don't get to use their resources unless you pay them tens of thousands of dollars. Look how much they were charging us for the policy rewrite. I mean, it's a lot more money than $1,800 is going to save us. If we want to save money and be worried about that, we should end WASB. I mean, that would be a far higher dollar value. But I do encourage you to listen to them. They bring in a lot of people outside of public education that support public education. And hopefully, at some point, we're going to get beyond the rhetoric and actually get back to actually doing things instead of trying to avoid causing problems, because the problems are coming, obviously, no matter what we do.
Yeah, and I've been on their side all week too, and I agree, I can do it as an individual. I don't need to put it on this committee to do that.
Anyway, we do have a motion on the table. Any other comments before we vote? All in favor of not joining this organization, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Thank you. And now we're moving back. Oh, we have one more item there. I'm so sorry.
Sorry. Number 6.
Number 6. Oh, yeah, the flags. Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Dave, for doing this. So, Dave went out and did the funding, got the flags, and do you want to introduce this, Dave?
So you'll see attached in board book the motion, which is basically American Indian Heritage Month is officially November. So in recognition of American Indian Heritage Month, of the land that our schools and district are cited on, of the commitment of the state of Wisconsin to American Indian history teaching in our schools, and of the contribution of our American Indian students and staff, the Ho-Chunk Nation flag will be flown at all Waunakee Community School District buildings for the month of November each year. That's the motion.
So my personal opinion on it, because I was in the last.
Oh, you
I
need a
was-
second. If there is a second.
I'll second that.
Second.
Okay, now comments.
Sorry. I don't know where you draw the line on the flags. I guess we vote on them anytime an issue comes up or a cause for it, and it's nothing against this particular one. I think when I looked at the board to do it on the Juneteenth flag, any of them, I personally don't think it should be on the flagpole with it, any of those. And I don't know the time you're gonna do it every year infinitum here, like it's gonna just keep going on like that. It doesn't, I'd find a different way to respect that. At some point, there's going to be a flag that wants to be flown that you don't agree with. And how do we where's the determination of what justifies using this one or what justifies that one? We're gonna run into a month where there's gonna be multiple issues, and it's like, well, this one already has that, but we're gonna do this one too, and we're gonna put, I can just see where it goes with that. So that's part of my hang-up of flying a different flag or an identifying flag. We have a country, we got a state, and now it's just other issues that on that same flagpole. I have my personal issue with it.
I guess one of the comments, or I thought we were going to come up with a policy on what flags we were going to fly. There was a discussion earlier on, is how do we handle this as a board? and I haven't heard anything on that. And, you know, I tend to agree, you know, we've got all of these things out there, and all of them are good causes. But, you know, when and where do we draw the line without having a policy in place, you know, to do some of this stuff?
I agree with that, about that idea, and that was brought up before. And the idea was to have the DEI committee be kind of our sounding board for it, is that you would get a proposal, you take it to the DEI committee, they would research, talk about it, send a recommendation back, and then the board would have a background to work with. Unfortunately, the DEI committee keeps getting stymied and hasn't gotten there yet.
This has nothing to do with DEI, because if...
No, that was the idea, that would be how the policy would work.
If I'm a military guy, why can't I have my Marine Corps flag flying up there? Or, you know, I've got some other cause, why can't I have that flag?
I guess it's
flying
not
up
that
there?
it couldn't.
You know,
Someone might make the motion of bringing that to the board, can we fly that? And then it's like, well, how do we make the determination of yes or no to that?
Yeah.
That's,
You know,
I
and
agree with that.
That's not necessarily DEI, that's policy.
I mean, maybe, well, you know, we do it, we just don't make these days up. I mean, it's state or federal months that represent these groups. So I agree, you know, I hope you'll take this up and start working on it with the policy group.
Well, that was my understanding.
Because I agree.
That actually, we discussed it here, and we did refer it at that meeting, and it was some time ago,
Yeah.
to policy to come up with a plan for that.
Yeah.
It wasn't voted on, but it was, you know, agreed
How long
by
was
the
this?
board as a whole, I
Was this before
thought.
my time, or?
I may be
Before your time.
misconnected on it.
Okay.
I think we had a change of elector.
And
Big Ted
it-
came on at the time.
And COVID and
Yeah.
lots of things, but yeah.
Yeah, I
it-
think that's what it is.
It's not on, we haven't had a policy committee
Right.
for a
Right.
bit, so we're just getting
But I
back into
think one
that.
of the things that we need is a policy, you know, so that we know what we're voting on. And if we have the policy, administration makes the decision.
I disagree. Well, I hope our policy doesn't say administration makes a
Well,
decision on something like this.
Then
It doesn't
are we
like
gonna
the
do
board.
every
But the
one?
policy provides you your guideline.
For this situation, I agree we should be voting for it until there's a change in policy. So I'd like to move,
So we do have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor of flying those flags, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
thing I saw, I was doing research on other districts. Oh, I'm sorry.
Jack and Ted. too.
A lot of our neighboring districts have some kind of reference to it on their opening of their webpage. Just like, you know, we sometimes have at the lower levels flashes about what holiday's coming up or whatever. I don't think it would be inappropriate for us to be able to do that on the district webpage, or if it's each of the school webpages.
Just to say it's
Somewhere.
Native American month and.
I think one of the things, Randy, before the next one of these things come up, we should have a policy in place to say, this is why we fly the flags. You know?
We'll add it to our
They'll
agenda.
get there. Okay. Thank you, David, for doing that. We are now down to administrative reports, recommendation, action items, skipping down to number 12. And this is
This is the
para.
This is the request for 4 additional para-educators at Arboretum per IEP needs and part of our discussion that we had in closed session.
Make the motion to accept formal pairs.
Second.
I get. Can we talk about it then?
Yep.
Sure. Go ahead. Go ahead,
It's all
Ted.
you.
Speak.
I'd agree with it, but it was troubling hearing that you could have the needs go to nothing, and what happens when that, if that were to happen?
I mean, we do have
that's my only-
provisions to move. I mean,
What's that?
I think the pieces that we have is that I would anticipate, hopefully we don't have a continued openings, but we seem to have a continual need
Yeah.
for more paras that we can have people around. That's generally what we've seen has happened in the past. If that weren't the case, then we would kind of reevaluate, and there are options to reduce. But I think there's probably going to be needs that we will fill in.
I would agree, I mean, but yeah, just
From
address that.
what I heard at listening sessions, there
there's
are
needs.
Absolutely.
definitely some
Correct.
needs.
So when we shift a regular ed para to a special ed para, does their pay change?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have a motion. Was there a second?
Yep.
Judy?
Judy? Any other discussion? All in favor of hiring the 4 new paras, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll keep you posted on, thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Tiffany. So the memorandum
We'll
for the
bring that.
village parking lot is not ready. So we are down to the calendar change you'd like to propose?
Yeah, this is just really being really proactive in our planning. Steve and I have had conversations with Aaron May, and we felt it was important for us to bring this here. Traditionally, when we have a team that goes to the state finals, we have never closed off. We've never closed school or had an early release. What we've normally been able to do is we dismiss those students that want to go. We run our same bus schedule, and we're able to kind of operate school throughout the course of the day. State football, we've had quite a bit of experience going down to that event. It's 11 to 13 buses. I mean, that's the team, that's the band, that's the cheerleaders, that's the dance team, that's the fan buses. And we just aren't able to operate the same way. So what Steve has worked with Lamers, they actually would be able to transport our students, the 11 to 13 buses, with drivers from other districts that work for Lamers. But we would need to, and my proposal would be to do an early release, because those drivers then need to go back to their districts to run their regular routes. Our drivers need to be available to go get all the kids that are down at Camp Randall. So what I'm recommending is that should our team win on Friday, that would take them to the state finals, I would do a K-12 early release that day in order to accommodate our being able to support our community going down and supporting our students. Asked our elementary principals, just from past experience, how many kids we normally lose during a state championship game like this. We usually learn about 40% of our K-6 kids. That's just a ballpark number that actually go down and are pulled out of school to go. So that's generally kind of where we're sitting, but in order to kind of support that in a similar way that we've had in the past, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. And
So Randy, is this long-term?
this
just
is,
one
no,
time?
I don't like the idea of trying to really change up our school calendar around these things. I really rather prefer to run it as normal. I just can't I don't have the
Because of
staffing.
bus shortage.
It's the bus driver
So
shortage
there
that's
needs to be a,
precipitating.
Motion
And-
on this?
It'd be great if there was. I mean,
I make the motion to do early release if our football team makes it to the state championship.
Right.
And I second that because I'm a sports fan.
Judy will be down there. I know she will.
Hold her down.
Wow.
Any other comments or
If you
thoughts?
only knew.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is if we have other teams throughout the year, I mean, that's kind of they all are treated a little bit differently as far as when they compete and how they do that. So that'll be a piece we'll be watching as we're blessed to have some very successful teams that
This-
kind of move forward.
Is this a 1 o'clock game?
It's a 1
Randy?
o'clock game,
So you
so-
would probably release at,
We're going to work with our principals on what the best time, and with Lamers what the best time is. So that'll be something we're going to work on. And we're going to get a communication out probably tomorrow.
yeah, I hope that we
Because we
can
want to
get that out
we want to
fast.
get parents, that's why we brought it here tonight.
Mhm.
And being a bit preemptive, we wanted parents to at least have this on their radar in the event that this is where we land.
Perfect, thank you. Announcements?
The announcement I have tonight is really a celebration. I mean, we have quarterly awards, you can see in the back. And one of our quarterly award winners this year is Rebecca. This is the award she gets as part of her, and this is nominated by staff and then voted on by a committee that Brian runs. So I wanted to say congratulations to Rebecca. She's the one who's, it's mainly for a lot of the work that she does here. So there you are. There we go. Taking your picture there, Jack.
I'm not sure that thing's gonna show up enough.
There you go.
But
I think,
bad thing of the glass section.
yeah, and I think just in the recognition as far as what, for the recommendations for Rebecca, it was really recognizing all the work that she puts in and a lot of hours with all of the committees and all the board things, so greatly appreciate that.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. We are down to consent agendas.
I'd like to pull out the field trip.
Brian's pulling out the field trip, the vocal music New York trip. I would just like to recognize the 2 donations that we have. Amy Nelson, who secured $500 worth of supplies for our health offices, and Scott Hamlin from Nord Gear to a $500 donation to Arboretum for their curriculum enhancement. So,
Randy, I just wanted to question on that health office donation, the way it said it was an emergency, some sort of quick need. What was that about? Do you know? If you don't, I'll find out later.
I can find out.
yeah,
Okay.
it sounded like they got like small food products, and I think we read what
Oh,
they
okay.
got.
It just sounded like it was under some event or something.
Oh, no, they just needed things for their health offices, like nutrition bars and
Oh,
feminine
okay.
hygiene products, and they were running low, they needed them. No.
It was more of a needs drive, is that what you're
Yes,
saying, Rebecca?
needs drive, yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so the New York trip has been pulled out. Anybody else have a concern? If not, I'll take a motion for everything but the trip.
Make a motion for everything but the trip.
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And now we'll talk
Can
about
I ask Molly to join us? That's actually
That's
why.
why,
she said-
she sat here for the last 4 hours.
She did, I know. Yeah.
That's why I pulled it out.
Yeah. Molly and I have had a few conversations about the trip, and one of the things we decided was we would bring it here and talk through it. She has to we wanted to be proactive, because if for any reason we don't go on it, you have some deadlines as far as being able to secure money back, which is coming up pretty quickly. So if there's specific questions, Brian, or if you just like to have Molly give
I
a
just wanted
couple
Molly to
minutes.
come present.
Oh, no. Yeah,
You
so-
sat here long enough.
Oh, that's sweet. So yeah, we're planning a drama and choir trip to New York. This is something we've done every 2 years. Would have happened last year, but obviously didn't. And so we are working through the logistics of that to be the safest way possible. One of the things to consider for this trip is that New York right now has a vaccine mandate for pretty much everything, for eating at restaurants, for being at museums, for being at any performances or Broadway shows, which are, the reasons you go to New York. So we are working with our travel company and with students and families. So some families may want they have the ability to have trip insurance, so they can continue to watch that situation if things change, and be able to get a full refund if they took the insurance to be able to watch, like I say, monitor the situation there. We'll be performing at, if we go, we'll be performing at Cathedral
just open it
St.
up,
John
please?
Divine, which is really cool. One of the biggest cathedrals, I think they say in the world, even though it's not finished. It's a fabulous space. Possibly a retirement home, but obviously that is a wait and see. Thank you for bringing that up. I could just read it to you, but all sorts of fabulous things. Kids, it's such a great opportunity for them to get out of their context and see arts in different forming forms, and share their language of music with other people and make those connections. So it's been a really positive experience in the past. They're very, very excited.
Yes, I mean, just to kind of a little bit of context, we haven't had a trip that we've this would be the first trip we've had since COVID started. Many of the other ones have been postponed. Some of them take place in the summer, so we have some that have been approved for this coming summer. Our process for trips has always been that you get approval to plan, and then you have approval for the final approval. So music has been in that process of having the prior approval to plan for it. They've planned for it. This is the piece now that they're trying to kind of execute it moving forward. It just has those pieces and entanglements. I think the piece that the board should consider is this the right time to go? Are you comfortable with that? And then obviously there's some changing protocols within New York. I mean, right now they do have, as Molly said, the vaccine requirements for a lot of the places that we go. Do they have any other ways around that if a student is not vaccinated? Is there a testing protocol or anything?
Yeah.
So that's the one piece that she and I talked about, and we felt we just wanted to be transparent and bring that here. Per policy, any of the travel outside of the state needs to come to the board for approval. So I think what we're looking for is any questions you have, considerations.
Molly, does the company give you any guarantee if, New York shuts down? I mean, what if they go back into more of a lockdown? Do they have any buffer on the COVID situation for refunds?
I should have brought that with me. There's a very good cancellation policy.
Good.
We have, that's one of the reasons we went with them. Many of the families have chosen to do at least partial insurance because we all know what world we live in. So they can't wrap that into the cost, though. I mean, that's something that families have to opt into, if that makes sense. But all travel companies are really careful right now about making sure that they do the best they can for their families, right? And so it may mean that they get credit towards another trip in the future, but we have the ability to cancel up until December, if that makes sense. So
That's generally why we have it here tonight.
Right.
Is to be
I make
proactive.
the motion to approve the trip.
I'll second that.
Any other comments, questions?
Any other safety concerns?
No, the typical safety concerns we address usually with the school officer liaison and the school nurse come to a meeting to discuss with families. We talk about safety in New York, those kinds of things, but nothing at this point.
I think the only piece that's probably the unknown is we've sent groups to New York in the past is really just around all the different pandemic protocols, and that's probably the one thing that's just a bit new in this process.
And something we probably won't know until closer to the date, right?
Thank you, Molly. All in favor of the trip, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks for playing,
There you go.
Molly.
Thanks, Molly, for being here.
Good luck. All right, I think the convention board, are we?
The convention's coming up on the 19th to the 21st in January. Rebecca does have a set of rooms reserved, as we've done every year. Ted, this is and probably Brian too, you haven't been around with one of these. Is that this is actually a convention in Milwaukee, where we normally go on a Tuesday, come back on a Friday. It's the entire school board's convention, school boards from around the state. They bring in national speakers, they have sectionals held by different school districts. It's a great networking time and to kind of learn more. So we kind of go down there. We've had groups as small as a couple board members and up to probably 5 or 6. And we have some of our administrative team that join you, and it's usually a pretty good week. So I think all we're looking for is some notice so that we can get people registered and take a look at your calendar and then just communicate with Rebecca.
Thank you. Legislative update or correspondence?
Don't have anything for that tonight.
So future meetings?
Yep, future meetings, you already mentioned that the subcommittee that's studying DEI is on November 15th. We've already have that set. We're looking for a budget committee. Steve, you were looking at the first week in December, is that right?
Yep. Can we do it next week? Because we're all going to be here.
We will not be ready until
about the first week in December with the information for the
What date?
First week in December.
Yeah, any day. No. Tuesday, well, depends what's gonna happen. What time are we talking about?
What time? 5:30?
Sure, that would work.
Joan,
And
does
what
that
day are
work
you
for
thinking about?
First week of December, you can do it on a Monday night or not?
Like on the 5th? No, the
The
6th?
sixth.
The 5th is Sunday. The 6th?
6 works for you?
I could do the 6th.
5:30?
Does that work?
Works.
December 6th, 5:30.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I'm also looking for a co-curricular.
The 6th
Okay.
of December.
All right, so we have December 6th at 5:30 as budget. We also need a co-curricular committee, which is Brian, Dave, and Mark. And I think that could,
So you want that in November, or?
I think he could probably go, let's get, I would say let's get past the 19th in the event if we end up going further in the tournament with football. That's a big week for him. So I would say that maybe that last week of November. Is there a date that works for y'all?
Tuesday, the 23rd?
I would say let's.
The last full week?
Or do you want?
Yeah, I'd go the
30th?
last
The
full week.
29th, the 30th.
Yeah, how about the 30th?
Okay.
So November 30th, what would be a good time?
Anything after 4.
So
Good, I'm open.
can we just do 4:30?
5:30 is fine.
4:30?
4:30.
4:30 is fine too.
4:30, that's co-curricular.
Dang, your
Mark, we
dog.
better check your calendar before you leave.
And then, policy committee, Ted?
Yeah.
I'd like to look at that. You and I met. If we could do that.
Who's on that?
Policy is
Dave
Ted,
and me.
Judy, and Dave. I think Rebecca, you and I are gonna need a little bit of time to do that. So if we could either do that, maybe that first week in December as
You
well.
want to do it on the 6th? How long are you talking? You want to do it before budget or even after?
We could do it,
After budget's going to get pretty late.
right, so Ted, Judy, could you do 4 o'clock?
I can do 4 o'clock.
On
So
the
we're
I'm
6th?
just going to come here in work boots. You're going to have to.
Yeah,
come.
would that work for you, Ted? 4 o'clock on December 6th?
Yes.
All right, let's do that then.
Hopefully it's not rainy and muddy that day.
Perfect. Any other committees that we need to schedule tonight?
We do have HR, but that I think has been,
Already scheduled.
Next
15th.
Monday.
That's already scheduled.
All right,
That's-
very good. That's all we
and
need.
do we
When is
have
that?
our community engagement?
That's the 29th.
Is that all
That's fine.
scheduled?
That's
Yes.
what he just gave you the agenda for.
Oh,
Yep,
Yes,
that's for the
but that
29th.
meeting has been.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
That's all on the books.
yep, that's all ready to go. That's all we need.
Okay, so we're done. Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I
Motion
was.
to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That's
You
how
guys
my-
missed it.
That's how my family plans.
They didn't